Here we are, Imperial Elegy, still working on the rules, about halfway through in terms of pages. Better otherwise, I think. I wanted to briefly talk about, I have to go through these rules inch by inch, just with that fine-tooth comb, and look at everything. Unlike, some of those more complicated war games, I'm thinking about things like A World at War here, right? Which has a humongous rule book, but it's easier to tell what I can elide and what I have to speak to there. Here, everything, and yes, I've played other games of this type, but so much of it is just little pieces that are kind of important, and you have to remember them, in order to play the game. I guess you could say the same about things like tech charts and World at War and whatnot. I don't know. The information in those games is easier to package in a way that's exposable. Today, speaking to, technically yesterday, because it is now Thursday morning, I did a little bit of yard work. Pulling vines, and I gotta tell you, it's turning into a real massive issue. I'm actually thinking about moving them into the yard waste container and throwing them out instead of just throwing them over my fence. Although they are useful because they kill they starve out the vines below them, so kind of like throwing them down, force them to fight their way through. Anyway, my arms were hurting from that. Plus, I hadn't gotten a lot of sleep. I ended up taking a bit of a nap, and it ended up being a decent-sized sleep. Altogether, about 4.5 hours, although I woke up in the middle of it. And now I've got laundry going, and I had a big scare with the laundry because the dryer wouldn't start. Turned out all I had to do was jiggle the power cord into the machine a little better or something. I don't know. But yeah, I had that happen once before where a component burned out, and that was an issue. Okay, we're gonna start with the rules on combat. And these should be relatively easy, to be honest. So you open up by putting a battle chit indicating who's the main attacker and defender. Then you calculate a die roll modifier, which is the total land combat modifiers. I think that's the firepower, essentially. Declare support. That's going to include firepower from units adjacent to one of the two units. Commit an elite unit. Okay, and then you can play any combat cards. And on all of these, the attacker has to make any decisions first. Each side rolls a die. One side adds the battle die roll modifier. That's going to be a net value. So if I'm at 3 points and you're at 2, I get a +1 to my die. Okay. Then you determine a differential between the two rolls, and you look at the CRT to find the results. Let's take a quick look at what the CRT looks like, if I can find it. I mean, there's a lot of charts in this game, right? Here it is. Now this is going to work for both land and naval combat, although there's some differences between how it's handled. But basically, if you roll the attacker +4 or greater, the defender is going to take 2 casualties. The attacker wins the battle as a decisive victory. And there's some markings on here. 2 stars. Once hydraulic recoil, the stars come into play. 2 stars, it adds a point of damage to each side. This is going to improve artillery tremendously, is basically the issue. And 1 star is the victor of the battle has an option to increase the casualties for both players. And then, although we're not doing naval here, decisive naval victories, you do double losses to the enemy. Now, here is something that during the Great War, players may remove forts to cancel retreats. The loser has to retreat. Forts reduce their level by 1 after a battle, and trenches inflict an additional loss on the attacker. Okay. We'll get to those later. Okay, so you place the chit, whatever. That indicates the main attacker and defender. The BDRM. Okay, the firepower assigns total firepower in the main attack defense force. If you have elite corps or colonials, if you choose to use them, you're only allowed to commit 1 in a battle, and it gives you a 1-point DRM. If you're low stability, you have a battle modifier, which is spelled out here, -1 or -2. UK Indian armies are affected by this modifier if India is unstable, and Ottoman Arab armies get this modifier earlier than regular Ottoman armies. And we'll look here. Stability, we have a battle modifier and an Arab battle modifier. Okay. Oddly enough, they shift the order here. So the Arab battle modifier is in the upper right in both of these, and the victory point is in the lower left. They switch them on 2. I mean, I see why they only put, the one thing in big text, but it's kind of annoying. Attacking along a difficult or severe connection gives you a penalty. If your main attack or defense force is only reduced forces without a fort, you take a penalty. ECs and EFs don't negate this penalty. I don't know why you would think they would. If you commit them, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. Any amphibious landing has a penalty. If you don't have a line of communication, you get a penalty. Jihad, special rule, contains a penalty. And once your manpower is exhausted in the Great War, you get a penalty because you won't be able to funnel more and more bodies into the meat grinder. Okay, support. Armies adjacent to the main attack force and or the main defense force, either side for either side, may contribute their firepower to battle as support. This is optional. Armies are never required to support. You can only commit 2 spaces per side to provide support. The supporting armies have to be adjacent to both the attacking and the defending space, there's different options. If they're adjacent to both the attacking and defending, all armies in the space can support. If they're adjacent to just one of the attacking or defending, only one army can support. And if you're adjacent via red connections, you cannot provide support. And those red connections, remember, are sort of rest of the world type things. These are severe. I don't know what the plain red is. But it goes through North Africa too. It's kind of interesting. Somewhere we have this. Okay. Gotcha. Red is severe. Dashed red means off map. The yellow border is Trans-Siberian. Again, shit just falls off your mind as you start going through more and more. It's just like, it doesn't have a standardization that seems to live across most things, most hex war games or stuff like that. Anything that starts using point-to-point boards is really, I find it's very difficult to remember everything that's involved about them. So now I have dashed black lines. What the fuck are those? Those are the difficult terrain. Okay. We were just on it. I just didn't look. Okay. Half support. Armies under the following conditions are only at half their firepower. And no matter how many of these you meet, firepower of those armies is only halved once. Supporting armies are only adjacent to attacking or defending spaces via difficult connections. If they're adjacent via a clear and a difficult connection, they're not halved. That's possible because you can join the battle by being adjacent either to the attacker or defender. And none of them are halved. Like, you don't have to send half the force over the defender connection or whatever. I don't know. If the supporting armies are from a different power than the power leading the attack and defense, power, that means minors are halved too. Yeah? I don't know about that. I thought minors were able to support their ally at full strength. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. The supporting armies are supporting into or from a Russian home space. Again, this is the size thing. And in the Great War, if the supporting armies are currently involved in a trench battle, because they're tied down in the trenches, they can't. When counting multiple half values in a stack, do not round each individual half value up. You round the total up for the whole stack, but not for the whole army or whatever. So you don't just keep those halves through all these different sets. Armies placed via the deploy reserves action cannot support during the impulse they were placed, and forts don't provide support. We talked about the combat results table. It's pretty simple. It's going to be a simple differential and gives you the losses and who won the battle. Machine guns and hydraulic recoil. These are card events. They permanently change combat. Machine guns give non-rebel units a minimum die roll of a 3 in land battle. If they roll a 1 or a 2, it's a 3. Hydraulic recoil causes the asterisks in double asterisks. And this is why, in the recent game that I played, Distant Foreign Fields, why artillery is so important. But I think they overstate it at the early stages, the mobile stages of the war. And it allowed you to do, let's just wander off on a tangent. Well, we talked about my dryer. It allowed you to utilize strategies or tactics, actually, but large-scale battlefield tactics that weren't really applicable at that early stage of the war, right from the beginning. Even though you had all the technical improvements, that kind of firepower just wasn't used, and it wasn't simply a lack of ammo or whatever, and the game doesn't actually give you more. Anyway, whatever. That game was a serious disappointment. Interesting things it was trying to model, but not enough work was done on it. Okay, losses. They take step losses equal to the number of losses on the CRT. The attacker applies their loss decisions first. The first step loss has to be a unit in the main attack defense force. After that, they can go to support. Non-player purple units cannot be eliminated unless all player units in their stack are reduced. Now, that doesn't mean that they take a step loss. That means they're on their flipped side. Army squadrons and dreadnoughts each have 2 steps. Flips over. If it takes a second step loss, it's lost. I shouldn't have to speak these things. The problem is I'm so used to speaking every fucking word at this point because I'm not able to gloss over stuff as easily. I mean, I could do it here, but then I get tied down. ECs don't have steps and can't take losses. However, if they eliminate an army, you must eliminate an EC. These are special rules that are just being repeated, but I'm glad they are. EC elimination changes once machine guns and hydraulic recoil are in play. EFs, Expeditionary Forces and Losses, they have 1 step. They have their own specific. If they're exclusively EFs, they cannot eliminate non-rebel armies, but they can cause step losses. A force comprised of EFs and armies cannot take losses on the EFs, but when a force comprised of both takes a step loss, they must eliminate an EF. I'm not sure what an EF, a non-elite one, does for you in an army. It can't take losses, and it doesn't add to your firepower. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think it adds to your firepower. Did we have firepower definition here? No. I mean, that's on the units. I don't know. I mean, maybe they do. And this is the other thing, because the concepts, I don't know, I have to look up each of these definitions. So versus non-rebel units, they have a 0 firepower. Yeah, they really don't work against armies. And that's fine. Except elite colonial EFs and the Zouaves are not subject to the third bullet point. We already had this. This is a complete reproduction of something else, as far as I'm concerned. When the attacker wins the battle, the defender must retreat. Trenches could negate a retreat. In land battles, now, we haven't gotten, I'm wondering if we're going to have fort here. Yeah, we do. No. Okay, here we go. The attacker, in land battles, the attacker never retreats. This is different from naval battles. Defenders retreat one space, and they must retreat to a friendly controlled or occupied space. Units do not have to retreat to the same space. You can split up a stack. A force that cannot retreat is eliminated. If the defender has a fort and is forced to retreat, the fort is eliminated. This is the rule for forts in here. Now let's go over here, because this ain't right. But I don't remember where I just saw it. I know where I just saw it. It was over here. And again, I tried my best to pencil in the errata. I'm not seeing that here. During the Great War, players may remove forts to cancel retreats. Okay, so I guess forts are pretty ineffective. They add a firepower to your defense. I don't think they add a step loss. We'll have to look at units to find this out. And again, it's like some of this stuff might make sense, but it's new for each game. And I don't know. Here's counters. Somewhere or another, there's a description of what each thing does. Okay, here are units, but that's not forts. I don't fucking know where the rule on fort is. And this is the problem. Because there's all these disparate little rules, when you get to one of these types of things that doesn't rely on a body of shared gaming rules, and I mean, that's where it gets interesting, right? You wouldn't want to play Here I Stand on different maps all over the place with that kind of abstraction. But you're adding so much complexity as to, because these spaces are point-to-point or areas or whatever, they just become so complex in terms of things like, in a lot of the games, interception capabilities, withdrawal from combat, all of that is always different in every game. There's not like a standard sort of feel to it. And honestly, a lot of that stuff is just sort of organically handled with a hex map. I don't know. I'm going to look for the fort rules. I'm getting really discouraged trying to work through these because, and again, this is why I keep staying away from these. I loved Here I Stand. I loved CDGs to begin with. But the more and more games are coming out with different, these differences, every time I have to work through the rules so much. And I just have too many fucking games is what it really comes down to. I can't even remember what my question is. I went looking for something, and I don't fucking remember it. And I'm just gonna. It's not. I don't think it's particularly a problem with the rules. It's a problem with the type of game. They can't handle this level of complexity, or I can't handle this level of complexity in the games. I found this problem with Paths of Glory, to be honest, to some extent, because again, it was different. You know, it was different from the CDGs I had seen, and it gets to me. I don't know. It's like there's too many layers of differences in each of these. And what it means is, I think it's just a less viable family of games. It is easier when they all follow the same kind of rules, but this one is going further off in a lot of ways. Anyway, let's see where I am. We were on these retreat rules. It looks to me like before the Great War, okay, what do forts do? They give you a firepower bonus. I couldn't find that rule. That's what I was looking for. I found a rule on forts. It was about the construction of them. I found a reference to forts, which was over here. Let's try one last thing. Let's try the index. Like, I found the rules reference. It went to the construction one. What I'm seeing here is a single entry for each rule. That doesn't work in an index. Like, it's going to send me to 12.12, which is how you construct the forts, if it's there. A, B, C, D, E, fort. 27 and 50. Well, that's two very different rules. 50 is awfully late, though. That's forts in Great War combat. Where do I get the firepower level? It's not listed here. I know it's listed under the actual units, but I couldn't find the fort thing. Well, maybe it's here. Here it is. Okay, here's what it is. There is one other effect. They negate the -1 DRM for having all reduced armies in your fort, in your main defense force. So they're worth one more point in some cases. Okay. I knew there was more to forts than just... they also reduce retreat, but apparently not here. I don't know. Now I want to look at this. And it is in that rule. It's just... and yeah, I'm in a grumpy-ass mood at this point. It's just, this is the construct fort action that I'm sent to. And I look at this and it looks complicated, but I assume, I don't know, I assume I'm not going to see what I see, so I don't see it. But I'm actually not... Yeah, okay. So it doesn't look like forts can be taken as losses or anything, unlike distant foreign fields. But, and if you're forced to retreat, you lose the fort, and I guess the defender gets to use them, the new defender. Okay, where are we? And we're going to stop at naval affairs. There's no question there. We were at retreats. Advance after combat. If the defender retreated, the attacker must advance into the defending space with at least one unit. All other units in the main attack force... Now, here it says, with at least one unit, all other units in the main attack force, including units belonging to different factions, may also advance. Supporting units cannot advance. Okay, fair enough. So, the attacker must advance with a unit from the main attack force. As noted in the CRT, a differential of 4 or more triggers a decisive battle. If the attacker wins a decisive battle, the units that advanced after combat can take another land battle action or move one additional space for free. This can only happen once per impulse, i.e. you can't chain them. Decisive battles and naval battles double the losing side's losses. Now let me look at the chart. because that's kind of funny. It says decisive here. It has a little thing. It says this. You know what it doesn't do? It doesn't tell me what the decisive effect is, and there isn't a rules reference there. Yeah, this thing's crowded. But some of it's crowded with stuff that I don't know if I really need. Like this whole page, I'm kind of iffy. This page is necessary. I don't know. They're putting a lot of stuff so you don't have to paw through the rule book. But things like the victory step and treaty options, I don't know. Does that actually need to be in here? But anyhow, I'm griping about too much on here, which can be a problem on its own. It makes it hard to find stuff and you stop knowing what's on there. You know, you maybe learn 2 or 3 things that are on there, but for the most part, if you're me, you paw through the rules anyhow because there's just too much on the player aid. It's a hard balance, man. I'm often finding myself saying, oh, that should be on the player aid, like I just did with just a line of information about decisive battles, because it's a little piece in here. Or at least the rules reference into it. Okay. Oh, but that means we are done for a bit, and I'm going to go play my video game. And I'm beginning to dread. I really am. The first read through, and this happens also so often when I'm reading rules. The first read through, it mostly made sense. Going through with the comb, I'm realizing this is going to be a hard fucking game to remember everything that's going on in it. Which leads to, yeah, you know, you kind of tailored it and carefully made all the rules to get, I don't know about with this one in particular, but to get a certain level of, you know, realism and accuracy and everything. And, well, if you make it too mechanically or especially mental mechanically difficult, you're going to introduce errors there. And in this case, there's just, it's not either of those, I think. It's just a matter of the rules burden and the special cases and everything. I could see big rules fuck ups and going through a whole game, and I don't think playing opposed would help that particularly, unless you're sitting there with a bunch of people who have studied the game. And that's the thing. Is this going to become a Twilight Struggle type game, right? Or a Here I Stand or whatever? Maybe. Part of why I think Here I Stand got as good as it did is that it was relatively simple compared to the things that grew out of it, though. And kind of the problem is you can't remake Here I Stand in a different era. That's not enough. That would be kind of like, oh, that's too derivative, too boring, whatever. But the amount of crap that something like Virgin Queen or this game or a few others that I have put onto that framework, there's more games in the family, and each one is different, and it just is becoming, it becomes clutter in your head. It's almost like, yeah, you can branch off and try to create a family like this, but you can't just keep adding games with the same rules base. They're boring. And if you put too much crap on them to try to make it something different and more interesting, you're going beyond what I can handle. Now, that's not to say, you know, like with Virgin Queen, a group of players could get used to playing it and play it a couple times a year. And that would be great. And they probably would get pretty used to it. Unfortunately, I get to play each game once, maybe twice in my lifetime. One of the points there is you have to be enchanted enough with the game to want to keep playing it. You know, want to keep coming back to it. And I don't know if that's going to be the case. I just don't. Like, yes, I felt that way with Here I Stand. I definitely did. I played it and I was like, ooh, I really like this game. I got some things wrong. I want to try it again. But the differences aren't great enough to make me sucked in and want to play the derivatives, but they're great enough to make it hard to play them without that sort of first approach again. Got the same thing with Levy and Campaign. I love the system, but each one has its own different rules and everything, and yeah, and it's hard to get used to it. It's hard to get used to it even normally, you know, even going back to the same game and replaying it. I don't know. I'm just getting old. Let's look at boats. Naval affairs. This happens when you move naval units into a space containing enemy naval units. It's not a special attack action. It can also be intercepted by units in adjacent ports, and naval units can try to avoid battle. Naval movement allows you to move all your naval units and a land unit. The land unit can come with you during an attack. During naval movement, when you move into a naval box that's connected to a port containing enemy naval units, those enemy naval units... Now, what's important is you have to be at war to do this, right? Those enemy naval units may attempt to intercept. The roll interrupts naval movement action and takes place immediately. The active player will be able to finish their naval movement after the interception attempt and subsequent battle if one occurs. Now, I have a note here. It says unit moves as well. A success. If an interception happens, you move into the. That's what this is about. You move into the C box. The active player is always the attacker. That results from interceptions. It doesn't matter because it's a differential. Actually, it does matter. The attacker has a slight advantage, which is weird, right? But a 0 or attacker +1. No, the defender has a slight advantage. Yeah, so the moving fleet, because what? No, the attacker has the advantage. Because a 0 is the same as attacker +1. The attacker wins. That feels kind of funky. It gives the advantage to attack in mobile warfare era, before the trenches come in, and it gives the advantage to the currently moving player in naval combat. Now, the moving player, I don't know what they are. You know, it feels really odd to me that this is generic across the board. But anyway, multiple players and spaces are allowed to intercept the same move. Each intercepting port makes its own roll. Intercepting units cannot be intercepted. Units using naval movement in European waters that were intercepted may continue moving within Europe if they won the battle. Naval interception modifiers, they have to roll a 5 or greater on one die to intercept. They get a bonus for 3 or more ports adjacent to the naval box. If the moving units don't have a port, this is sort of handling the coaling rights issue, but less drastically than like Pax Britannica does. Friendly naval units are already present in the naval box. Gives a +1 to the interceptor, i.e. if their own ships are going to be attacked. And UK naval units intercepting into the North Atlantic have a bonus. The North Atlantic is the only box adjacent to England. They tended to patrol that area pretty heavily. Prior to a naval battle, the defender, i.e. you can't avoid an interception, can choose to attempt to avoid battle. Because when you're intercepted, you're still the attacker. Similar to interception, all avoids are made at the conclusion of a naval movement action. They specify the interception here. Actually, neither side can try to avoid the battle, but That might be important because you might fail with some of your interception attempts. Players must choose the space where they're avoiding battle before rolling the die. This must... Oh, the space to which they're... The space they are avoiding battle to. Okay. This must be a friendly port or naval box. When avoiding battle into a port, the port stacking limit of 4 still applies. If you were going to be overstacked, you could choose to avoid battle into 2 or more ports, but with only 1 roll. Okay. When avoiding battle, players cannot choose a space that would take them through the Straits of Gibraltar, the Dardanelles, or a canal, unless those are friendly controlled. Players cannot avoid battle into a naval box containing enemy units or into a space they were attacked from. You have to roll greater than a 5. If you're in an ocean box, you get a +1. What is an ocean box? An ocean box is anything that's not Western Med, Eastern Med, Baltic, or Black Sea. Which is okay. All the other boxes are quite large. They could say just not on the European map, but there's an exception, North Atlantic there. Attacking player has no friendly ports adjacent to the naval box, gives you a bonus. Attacker has 2 more ports than the player avoiding. I am assuming that's 2 or more. Gives a -1. A force that successfully avoids battle moves to the chosen space. After a force successfully avoids battle, the attacking force cannot continue moving. Additionally, a force that successfully avoids battle cannot be intercepted on its way. It might be going through other naval boxes, right? Probably not. Yeah, it can be any friendly port or naval battle. It doesn't have to be adjacent. Interesting. Okay. Naval battle. Check for mines. I don't remember that. This is this exclamation point. It's on the mines roll, too. Okay. Calculate the battle die roll. Each side rolls, adds, same as the land combat, determine a differential, and look at the results. Mines. All keys that are ports are inherently mined. I completely forgot about this. During naval battles in keys that are ports, remember you can sail into a port and attack, the defending player will roll for mines. When rolling for mines, you roll dice equal to the current turn, the current game turn, not the current Great War turn. And any rolls of so this gets really nasty very quickly. Any rolls of a 4 or more inflict a hit on the attacker. However, after suffering the first 2 hits, the attacker can ignore any remaining hits if they choose to retreat. The majority of step losses from mines must be taken on dreadnoughts if there are any present. The battle die roll. Firepower. Remember the effect dreadnoughts have on firepower of squadrons and stuff like that. Stability has its impact here. If you have no friendly ports adjacent to an embattled area, if you're in a port, the embattled area is going to be the naval box next to you. So what did that just say? No friendly ports. So you would have one, right? Yeah. I don't know. Oh, here's why. Okay, that gives you a -2. But if you have greater than 2 or more if you have greater than or equal to 2 more ports than your opponent adjacent to the embattled area, you get a +1. That's why it's necessary to look. If all your units are reduced, you get a -1. And if you failed to attempt to avoid battle, you get a -1. If manpower is exhausted, you get a -1. I'm a little less convinced that manpower would have a significant effect on deployment to the navies. So here's the thing. For some countries, it would. There's no question. Like the Germans stripped their naval forces off their ships and used them on the ground. But they didn't use their ships. I'm not really convinced that Britain would do the same thing. Oh, well. But again, how many special cases do you want to throw in? My brain's already not going to remember stuff. Naval losses are equal to the number of casualties suffered. Purple units cannot be eliminated unless all the player units are reduced. Dreadnought. The majority of step losses in naval battles must be taken by dreadnoughts if any are present. This is cool because I think, except maybe Italy, non-player powers aren't going to have dreadnoughts. And that could cause an issue where we have a conflict here. If Italy should definitely have some dreadnoughts by the end of the game. So there is some potential still for an issue. Land unit losses in naval battles. The land units are eliminated if all the naval units accompanying the stack of land units. I'm not sure how you get a stack of land units out to sea. Certainly not with the must land at a port rule. Are eliminated. So if all the naval units accompanying the stack are eliminated, the land unit is eliminated. If the land units are caught alone in a naval box without any accompanying naval units, that would be a bad idea. If you cannot retreat. If none of these conditions apply, the player was forced to retreat, the land units retreat with their accompanying naval units. I'm not sure if you can just take casualties on your land units. Seems like you'd screen them, but I don't know. Winning a naval battle forces the loser to retreat. The loser has to retreat to an adjacent friendly port or to an adjacent naval box that doesn't contain enemy units. Including enemy land units, though. Attacking units must retreat to the naval boxes that they attacked from. Defending units cannot retreat to a naval box that the attacker attacked from. Units that cannot retreat are eliminated. You might be in a bad position here, where you leave enemy naval units in the space that you attack from, and then you're not able to retreat into the only space you're allowed to retreat to. I don't like that, but like in land battles, naval units can become overstacked by retreating. Remember, port stacking is limited to 4 naval units. A space that is overstacked suffers a step loss at the beginning. So this is weird. You can avoid battle and split your forces up, but it looks like retreat is not that way. I'm not really sure. Actually, it doesn't seem to say anything. But you might be forced, because you have to go adjacent here. Avoid battle doesn't say anything about adjacency, correct? Yep. You can sail anywhere in the world. Very interesting. I do not like that. Movement after a naval battle. After the loser retreats, the active player won the naval battle. The active player may move any of their units that participated in the naval battle, including an accompanying land unit. See, it's only one land unit. It's not a stack of them. Anyway, some of this is because of the errata, though. Into an adjacent friendly port spaces. In the case of a joint naval operation, there may be multiple active players, all the players that moved units during the impulse. Oh, that could do it. Clarification. However, units that fought in a naval battle in a European waters naval box may continue moving in a decisive victory only. So your choices after a naval battle are move to an adjacent port, right? Or if you're on the European map, you can keep moving only in a decisive victory. And this is this was a weird contradiction, to be honest. Anyway, Like you wouldn't even be, the way it was originally worded, you wouldn't even be able to go to port. Okay, forts and naval battles in ports. Forts contribute their firepower to a naval battle if the battle is taking place in their space. Any fort in Istanbul is also considered to be in the Dardanelles. Luckily, there is a rules reminder if anybody's fucking around in there. That's actually a really helpful little thing. If the defending player loses a naval battle in a port containing a fort, the fort is eliminated, including its land portion. Victorious attacking naval units will always displace back to the naval box after they attacked from sea. And there's some reasoning why you might want to sail into a port to attack. I can see various reasons. It sounds horrible because of the likelihood of mines and everything. Okay, amphibious assaults. Land units cannot move into enemy-controlled or occupied ports using naval movement. Landing in an enemy port, even if the port does not contain enemy units, can only be done through a land battle action. In order to land in an enemy port, the attacking units must be... Oh, this is a problem. Must begin their impulse in a naval box adjacent to the port space. Additionally, if the defending port contains naval units, the attacking player must have twice as many naval units in adjacent naval boxes than the defender has in the port. I think we're going to see a rule that directly contradicts the errata. A maximum of 2 armies can attack in an amphibious assault, and both armies must begin the impulse in the same naval box. This would be hard to manage, adjacent to the port space. If the port does not contain enemy land units, or an enemy fort, the attacking units just move in and the action's over. If the enemy port does contain an enemy land units or fort, the landing forces attack the space from the naval box and the battle is fought. The attacker will incur the amphibious assault modifier. If the attacking units lose the battle, they remain in the naval box they attacked from. Okay. Here's where we got a problem. Somewhere in the errata, on naval movement, but maybe it's only naval movement. Oh, fuck. I'm wondering if it's only naval movement in peacetime, but still, it's possibly problematic. Fuck. This is war aims. I'm in the wrong place. Wartime action, naval movement in wartime. Okay, so, and maybe I missed a piece of something, but here, there's a errata that says in peacetime, you must land in a port at the end of your movement. So you can't set up an invasion beforehand, and that was kind of the intent of that rule anyway. But there is no contradiction in play. That's cool. Amphibious assault and support. Amphibious assaults, the attacker space is considered to be the naval box. In practical terms, this means that during amphibious assault, only armies adjacent to the defender can support, and only one army from each of those spaces can provide support. No limitation, no, same limitation on the defender too, because they won't be adjacent to both. Displace naval units during wartime. If you move land units into an enemy port containing enemy naval units, those naval units are displaced to an adjacent naval box. This displacement may result in a naval battle. If it does, the displaced units are the attackers. This displacement can be intercepted. It's weird because like withdrawal can't, retreat can't, and displacing naval units cannot attempt to avoid battle if moving into a naval box containing enemy naval units. Finish the act. Oh, so you're automatically hit by enemy naval units. Finish the active player's action before resolving any naval interception attempts and or naval battles that result from such displacement. Without support, amphibious assaults are risky. See, the threat is more powerful than the actual assault. Naval movement only allows you to move one army per impulse, meaning if you want a large landing force, 2, it'll take multiple impulses, 2, to get there. Okay. The end phase. All right. So that is the combat and war rules prior to the Great War modifications. Now we're jumping back to sort of the main part of the turn. After the action phase, you hit this end phase, and this is going to just be a cleanup time, but I'm going to deal with my laundry and other stuff. All right, the end phase. Militarism, we've already kind of talked about this. You either get a step of army, your choice reserve or standing, or prevent one of your forts from dropping a step. That'll be in the next set. The gain an army step is treated just like 1 CP recruitment in terms of where it goes and whatnot. And then if you didn't maintain a fort, they all go down by 1 level. If you did maintain one, you get to save one level 1 or 2 fort from going down. Non-player power build step. If Italy's unified, they automatically rebuild all their units to full strength and flip all reduced units to full strength. Then conduct an Italian redeployment, which again is going to be its own special rule. Check the end phase build box and give each independent minor power in the build box 1 army step. Now, that's just a list of powers, and then these are the armies that they can rebuild through this mechanism, in addition to whatever they have on the board. Any other armies they have, I think, have to be built by players. That's not as well described as I'd like it to be in the rules itself, but that's the only interpretation that I can get as to why there's counters up there and whatnot. Some powers are listed in red. They start the campaign game with an army in the end phase build box. That's just a setup thing. They're already in there for me. This step increase cannot give a minor power more than 1 army, with the exception of Poland and maybe some others. Apparently there are events or whatever that can trigger it for others. I don't know. Minor power is not displayed in the end phase build box. Do not gain an army step at this phase. If placing a new army for a minor power that controls multiple spaces, put it in the space that shares its name. I also don't know whether or not they rebuild. If a player builds them an army, if they will rebuild that if it gets damaged. There's definitely some clarifications that didn't make it into the errata. Naval units go to port. All naval units return to the nearest friendly port. They probably are already in them because of the errata. If possible, the port space must be adjacent to the naval box they currently occupy. Players may move into uncontrolled spaces where they have influence. If a power does not control a port, their naval units are eliminated. At this point, you set your manpower based on your number of keys. If you have armies that are in excess of your new manpower limit, they are just eliminated. Then if you played an industrialization card, you roll a die, add the CP value of that card, and if you roll greater than a 5, well, greater than or equal to a 5, a 6 for Russia and the Ottomans, you industrialize, and you get another point on the industry table. All players okay, so it's possible that you've got an auto-industrialization instead, and those, if you played a card, just automatically industrialize without a roll. If you fail to industrialize, you flip your chit to its auto side and place it in the events box on the player display, indicating that you have to play a card to trigger that. Truces flip down. We've already touched on all of this. A lot of it is repeated, which is part of why it's taking so long. Okay, progress of independence wars. But there are things like this that are completely new, you know. At this point, players progress all wars of independence by one step. They have two steps, 0 and +1. If a space contains a WOI marker that began this phase on the +1 side, the space gains independence. If it gains independence, all units except those belonging to the newly independent minor power are immediately displaced, and the player who lost the space decreases their stability to 1. And then all remaining WOIs, which will be on the 0 side, go to +1. I got a problem. I don't remember pacification. I know we touched on it. Let me get back. I kind of did remember it. It's only uncontrolled spaces, which are not WOI spaces. So far, I see no way to reduce the WOI in any of the rules that we've seen. I'm going to make another search, but I'm really troubled. We got rebels here. Maybe that'll tell me. All right, we'll hold off until we get to the rebels section. But, you know, again, there may not be a better way to organize the rules, but when you've got so many disparate things like this, it just doesn't fit together well. And so you're often left with this, I read something and I don't understand what the hell's going on. The alliance resolution step, we've already seen the rules for it. Decrease rule tension, draw NGs. This is all stuff we've seen before. Advance the turn marker, nothing complicated. Okay. Rebel armies are usually created as a result of events, and most rebel armies are placed under a WOI marker. There are some exceptions, Zulu, Mahdi, Ethiopian, and Boxers. These armies are placed on the board without a WOI marker and are always treated as rebels. Okay, so there is a relationship between the two. They cannot become a minor power, and armies that are always treated as rebels are marker with a dagger to signify this. I guess that's supposed to be marked. Historically, these weren't actual rebels. They were independent states that fought against colonial powers. Not the Boxers, the Ethiopians, Modest, and Zulu. And in the case of Ethiopia, they were able to defeat the Italians. Yeah, again and again. Rebels in control. While a space contains rebel units, it cannot be controlled. When rebel armies are placed, decrease the controlling player's keys by the appropriate amount until the rebels are eliminated. Okay. However, while rebels are in a space, the player that controlled the space can move their units into it. However, this ends the movement of those units. They cannot do this if the space also contains units belonging to an enemy power during a war of liberation. It's possible for the placement of rebels to cause armies to have a broken line of communication. When this happens, displace the armies to the nearest controlled space with a LOC. If a rebel army under a WOI is ever eliminated, the WOI marker is removed and the player gains control of the space. Okay, so the WOI, all it is a timer saying the rebellion will succeed if you don't deal with the rebel army before that, and it's gotten rid of that way. Rebel armies can't move. They don't have machine guns. They don't benefit from. They cannot retreat and are eliminated if forced to. Rebel armies and player units can coexist in the same space. In land battles during peacetime, rebel armies will only support other rebel armies of the same nationality. In a war of liberation, rebels are friendly to and may support the attacking player if that player's war aim is to liberate them. Rebels that the attacking player is not trying to liberate are considered enemies to all embattled players. Of course, you can declare you're trying to liberate them and maybe not actually do so. But you've got to try to liberate someone, so, like in your peace proposal. In a war of liberation, if the attacking player is trying to liberate them, rebel units are considered to occupy the spaces for the attacker if that space solely contains rebels. If the rebels still can't move, this only applies if a space solely contains rebel units. Remember, the war all takes place like during a single card play, so they're not going to really affect the WOI. It's not like the Great War where multiple turns go by or whatever. At the end of a war of liberation, rebels liberated by a player become a minor power, where eligible, and are automatically allied to the player that liberated them. Allies, including non-player allies, can provide support during land battles against rebels, even in peacetime. However, such support is always optional, and there is no penalty for denying support. The way you're positioned might affect this in terms of how many armies can apply from a given space. Attacking a space containing rebels and enemy units during wartime, it's possible for spaces to have both belonging to enemy powers. When attacking such spaces, players must first attack the units belonging to the enemy powers. If the attacking player wins, they may then attack the rebels on a subsequent impulse. Importantly, the space cannot be occupied until the rebels are eliminated unless the rebels are friendly to the attacker. Now, occupied is a weird term here because I think you can occupy, not the special game turn, the space by moving your armies into it as long as there are no enemy armies in it. But occupied has a definition in the game, and it's kind of disturbing. This is some place where, like, bolding terms that are specific to the game or whatever that have a defined meaning is useful in a rule book. We don't see that here, though. At the start of the Great War, if a space contains rebels and player units, the player units are immediately displaced. Unlike rebels prior to the Great War, rebel and non-rebel cannot coexist in the same space during a Great War. Additionally, active rebels are hostile to all embattled powers, and they will never join the Great War. Rebel spaces never contain trenches. Okay. Oh, boy. All right, let's do Italy and Poland. Italy is not directly controlled by a player and instead interacts with the game through a series of special rules and the Italy mandatory event card. My damn nose still not fixed. Like, it's never going to fix this. Something got broken in it. The Italy event card begins the game in the deck and has the potential to be played 7 times over the course of the game. When the Italy card is played, one of 2 things happens. If Italy is not unified, the active player rolls on the Italian minor powers table. Or if Italy is unified, the active player rolls on the Kingdom of Italy table. I think these are in here as well as in the rulebook. I'll probably be working out of the rulebook for most of this just because that thing is so big I'm never going to know what's in it, where anything is. As a quick reference, both tables are on page 3 of the player aid card. Now, with each player holding their own player aid card and only one rulebook available, normally I think the player aid cards are going to be more of a reference for people. By the way, I got a comment from one of my regular viewers that these cards don't damage easily, as thin as they feel, that they seem to be made out of some kind of plastic. They're certainly not plastic cards. I don't know. I'm not sure. The slickness on the back feels kind of like those did. Those never, those would squirt out of your hand and stuff the same way these do. So I don't know. If I had an extra, blank card, I would consider dipping it in water and see if it's a true plastic card. Because I've played with plastic cards. A friend of mine used to spend $10 or whatever and buy a used set of them. And the funny thing about them is every now and then they will just break. I don't think that's going to happen with these. These don't have, I don't know, these don't feel the same. But anyway, we're not going to try to destroy these cards. But I am curious. Okay. There's a picture of the Italy card. Italian minor table has several different options on it. Lost Dream gets rid of the card. Uprising, we'll see. These others are all gonna be defined here. Uprising. Place a rebel Italian army and a WOI marker in a player-controlled space in Italy. If the rebels gain independence, either Sardinia, Piedmont, or Kingdom of Two Sicilies, whichever one's closer, takes control. If there are no player-controlled spaces in Italy, this result causes Italy to immediately unify. Petition for aid. If Sardinia, Piedmont, or the Kingdom of Two Sicilies are allied with a player that controls an Italian unification space, the active player removes that player's ally marker from one of those powers. Place a +1 card marker in the Italian unification box if one is not already there. After a player wins an Italian war for unification, they get that card. I'm assuming wins it. Well, maybe on either side. Yeah, interesting. Note that the AU power does not gain this +1 card marker if they win a war of unification using their incorporate national characteristic. That doesn't cause a war, if I recall correctly. This rule only applies to Italian wars of unification. We'll see more about that later. It's on their card, but it's also in the rules. Internal, and I don't know if it's as full on the card. Internal Italian war. Choose either Sardinia, Piedmont, or the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. That power gains an army, a naval squadron, and takes control of a neighboring Italian key that is not controlled by a player. There will only ever be one. Is this true? I don't know. Here's the problem. In general, I would say that is true. But Tuscany and Lombardy, I'm not sure if there's a way for Lombardy to become... Yeah, I don't think it can become a neutral. Yeah, okay, I'll agree. And the reason there can only be one is because it's just like a chain of spaces going up. That blah, 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 blah. Eliminate all minor power armies in the conquered space. If Sardinia, Piedmont, or the Kingdom of Two Sicilies now controls 3 or more Italian keys, roll for Italian unification. Here. Nationalist wave is the last of the possibles. Choose either Sardinia, Piedmont, or the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. That power immediately takes control of 2 keys in Italy that are not controlled by a player. The active player chooses which keys are taken. Roll for unification. What's interesting here is I think they can take the other option, like Piedmont can grab Naples. As far as I see. You know what's interesting? It doesn't gain troops by doing it this way. So this way it can create more troops. I don't know, because eventually Italy will be formed. Roll a die. On a result of 7 or more, Italy unifies. It's +2 if there are no player-controlled spaces in Italy. +1 per key controlled by the Italian minor power with the most keys. So there is a chance right from the beginning. Italian Wars of Unification. Reminder, any player with a diplomacy or ally in either Sardinia, Piedmont, or Kingdom of Two Sicilies can declare a war for Italian unification. First, the attacking player must declare which Italian state they will give any conquered land to. It must be one of those two. Then the attacking player gains an alliance with that power if they don't already have one. France starts with a diplomacy marker, so they could start this process off. Any land gained in such a war must be given to either Sardinia, Piedmont, or the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, whichever was chosen. If the attacking player wins the war, they must choose the territorial cession treaty option. Having trouble every time I see that. Additionally, just so used to my Civil War stuff. Additionally, if the attacking player wins, roll for Italian unification. Okay. That's up here, but now we have the rule for Italian unification. If Italy unifies, the following occurs. All Italian unification spaces that are not controlled by a player become part of the new Kingdom of Italy. Remove all player influence and ally markers from Italian spaces. Remove all Italian minor power units. Italy gains 3 standing armies and 1 naval squadron. Conduct an Italian redeployment. Flip the Italy unified marker. To its check side, all Italian minors cease to exist. All Italian spaces without a player control are controlled by Italy. The Italy flashpoint ceases to exist. Place the Italian alliance marker in the neutral box of the alliance track and place the MPIT on the MPIT track. I guess you put it at level 1 on neutral, just like you would when resetting it. Then, if Italy unified immediately after an Italian War of Unification, the primary belligerent that won the Italian War of Unification can spend 2 free CP to influence Italy on the MPIT, and they could do that against themselves if they wanted. The Italian unification procedure went through a lot of revisions. The key was finding a balance between giving Italy flexibility and giving players a chance to prevent unification, allowing for results where Italy can quickly and unexpectedly unify, Okay. Note that you might have a pretty strong ally in Sardinia, Piedmont, but you're going to, or Naples, Sicily. But even if you succeed, you're going to have a much, much less aligned power if you support unification. Yeah, it's turning light. Maybe I'll get a pretty sunrise. I had a really beautiful sunset, but I couldn't see it. I could see it reflected off the clouds. Okay, once the Kingdom of Italy is formed, when you play the Kingdom of Italy card, or when you play the Italy card, you roll on this table. Let's look at the results. King vacillates. Italy gains 2 neutral influence on the MPIT. Active player places an Italian control marker on an uncontrolled naval base. This is probably going to be somewhere in the rest of the world, if there is such. Italy permanently gains an additional reserve army and an additional naval unit. Okay, and then finally, in this one, I got all kind of shit here. If Italy plus OT is allied, Italy goes neutral and then stop. Yeah, okay. So this one, and there's a +1 DRM starting on turn 5. Italy declares war on the Ottomans to conquer an Eastern Mediterranean naval base in either Tunisia or Libya, the active player's choice. You don't affect the world tension. Roll a die. On a result of 4 or higher, Italy wins. +1 DRM for each Italian naval unit on the main map. -1 for each Ottoman naval unit on the main map. -2 if the Ottomans have an army in Africa. Problem is, this is Africa. Which is not what they're fighting over. No player can join this war. There's no alliance shift. There were a lot of notes on this. Oh, wait. Okay, this says squadron before dreadnoughts. Okay, fair enough. Where are we? If OT does not control any of the above spaces, or Italy and OT have a truce, treat it as if you had a 5 or 6, where they build more armies. All right, the Italian military. When Italy unifies, an Italian redeployment occurs. 1 Italian standing army is placed in Rome, and the other 2 are placed in spaces that are adjacent to player control spaces. Usually this will be Piedmont and Lombardy. But obviously, if we didn't take Lombardy, it would be Tuscany, or if somebody stole something from us. But if there are 2 such spaces, place an army in each of the spaces. If there's only one, you put them both in that. Italian naval units are always placed in Naples or Piedmont if Naples is not Italian controlled. Italy can gain more units through the play of the Italy mandatory event. We saw that. In wartime, Italy is controlled by the allied player who is earliest in the wartime initiative order. Treat Italy as though it has one industry for rail movement and deploy reserves. I think we already read that somewhere. If Italy is defending alone with no allies, their standing armies not in Rome automatically displaced to the targeted war goal spaces at the start of the war. During the Italian impulse, they will always deploy a reserve army to defend or support, in that order, the goal spaces. If Italy ever has to choose between 2 spaces, roll a die. Place destroyed Italian units in the minor build space marked Italy. During the end phase, Italy automatically rebuilds all their forces to full strength, and then uses Italian redeployment. Poland. An independent Poland. I love that it's there. I really do. I don't know how much chance there would have been of it. Certainly there was back in Napoleonic, but yeah. I mean, there were nationalistic revolutions elsewhere. Follows all normal minor power rules except they have these specials. Poland can build armies equal to the number of Polish spaces they control plus 1. The Polish 4th and 5th armies are reserves and must be placed in the Polish Reserve Army's holding box. Over here, there's an Italian reserve too. During wartime, the player controlling Poland takes a deploy reserves action. They may also deploy 1 Polish reserve army in addition to their own. And during the end phase, an independent Poland builds 2 army steps instead of 1. Okay. The rest of this, I think, is the Great War. Now, then the national characteristics, which I think we want to go through because we're going to have to go through them somewhere, and the bots, which we're not going to do. The designer of the game suggests not learning the Great War portion of the game. And in fact, there's like a 2-turn scenario to learn the basic mechanisms of the game. I'm just going to go to the Grand Campaign, probably fuck shit up. That's life. I'm going to go through the Great War because it's, I don't want to come back and reiterate, and go back to rules reading once we get started. Of course, it is going to fall off my head in terms of it's going to take many turns for the Great War to happen. It may never happen, but we'll see. So back up here. It's awfully bright out now. Hasn't yet peaked and hit here, but it's getting close. So I'm going to have to break it at some point. Okay. The crisis table is on the back of the playbook here. And we'll take a look at that when we need to. I kind of feel like I need this space. I don't know why. When the WTT reaches 5, the active player rolls on the crisis table. To check if the GW occurs. All the results except international conference cause an outbreak of the GW. I'm looking to see. I don't know about these. This isn't making pure sense to me because there's a die roll, but there's also this, and this isn't showing up. Okay, let's keep looking and see if it starts making sense. Most of the results are purely narrative and don't affect the game state in any way. But special crisis table results will cause additional powers to join the Great War. Okay. If you play an event which causes the WTT to increase, a roll is made on the to 5. A roll is made on the crisis table. The event is called the inciting event. The text of the event must be followed carefully. Everything that is stated on the event before increasing the WTT to 5 still occurs. Then the crisis roll is made. If GW breaks out, the rest of the text on the event is ignored. If it doesn't, the rest is followed. Now, these are the events but other things can cause the WTT to increase. Oh, well, this is specified when the play of an event causes it to increase to 5. Something feels weird here. Because, again, like, there are things like breaking alliances and stuff that I believe impact the WTT directly. I don't recall the stack of information involved in the game is too high, which means this is one of the things that these more and more complex games, CDG, here I stand style CDGs, I especially point to. But any game that starts getting more and more complex and layering more and more crap on it, you can no longer strategize until you've played the game a few times. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there are things other than events that cause the table. Now here it says when the WTT reaches 5, you roll on the crisis table. But these other things, these are all event cards, I think. This is an event, yeah. This one, I don't know. That may be the general case otherwise. I'm not sure. All right. However, Balkan Wars and Powder Keg have players randomly select an independent Balkan state by rolling on the Balkan state table, which is here. If the result is a Balkan state that's not independent, re-roll. After consulting the incident column, the active player rolls on the row matching the inciting event. That's a weird way to put it. Some events require 2 rolls. These events are labeled with a step 1 and step 2. Again, most of the results are purely for the narrative and have no effect on gameplay. Yeah, so some of these are multiple on a single card. I'm not sure. Like here, you're looking to see what the target is and then who the terrorism is affected by. And for the most part, that just doesn't matter, except that you could end up in international conference. Well, let's keep plowing through. Most of these results are purely narrative. Yeah. If any of these results occurred, play simply proceeds to the outbreak step of the Great War. Here are the special results. Special results draw non-player powers into the Great War. They're marked with a double asterisk. So like the Balkan table here is actually everything under Powder Keg looks like it has one. I can't tell. I can't tell if there's single asterisks and something else. International conferences, the single asterisk. So there's a fair number of these. Okay, let's keep looking. These draw minor powers into the Great War when it starts. Otherwise, no minor powers enter the war when it starts, regardless of who is their current ally. When a bordering nation result is rolled, the active player selects a power that borders the targeted player. In this case, the targeted player is the player the inciting event affected or the player determined by the crisis table result. And we see that in the crisis table. That's like target here. The active player cannot choose a bordering power that is allied to the targeted power, and a unified Italy can only be chosen if there are no other options. But Italy still can't be chosen if it's allied. If a minor power was selected, any player in the alliance opposing the targeted player places an ally marker in the minor power space if one was not already present. If Italy was chosen, it shifts into the alliance opposing the targeted player. And we have an example here. Assassination is played on Austria. The bordering nation result is rolled. It's Serbia. This is the historical, and this nation is blamed. Serbia then enters the war on the alliance opposing Austria. An ally marker does not need to be placed in Serbia because it's already a Russian ally, and Russia is in the alliance opposing Austria. Balkan table crisis results. When Balkan table is rolled, one or two Balkan states will enter the Great War. To represent the dynamic and volatile politics, this can cause Baltic states to switch alliance. The Balkan table can be rolled if the Bosnian, Balkan, or powder keg was the inciting effect. If Balkan table is rolled, you roll on the Balkan table under the Bosnian crisis. Great, thanks. I don't know. Here it says the Balkan states will enter. That doesn't sound very good. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at something specific, right? No, Bosnian crisis. Okay. Bosnian crisis, Balkan table rolled twice. Yeah, so you'd pull two countries in. And they will go against Austria no matter what. Ouchies. Okay. Balkan Wars and powder keg. That's one thing, maybe two different tables. A Balkan state is threatened by possibly something else. Threatened by an ally? Wow. I don't know what happens with these. Balkan table is rolled on Balkan Wars or powder keg. Players on the Balkan states table. This doesn't even make sense as a sentence. If the result is rolled on the Balkans table powder keg, players on the Balkan, I guess, roll on the Balkan states table to determine who is threatening the other Balkan state as determined in the incident column. This might be in the errata, and I just said it was clear, but it is causing my tired brain problems. Then roll on the step 2 roll to determine who the threatened Balkan appeals to. Okay, so that makes more sense that it would be to an ally, because there's a lot of them that go to ally, and it's like, wow, it wouldn't make sense if I was threatened by an ally. Yeah, okay, great. Does this? That's blackhand. Balkan state appeals to. Okay, it does spell it out. I'm just not used to this table because it's not reproduced in here, unlike most of the others, and my brain's not working very well. The threatened Balkan state will join the respondent's alliance, while the threatening powers will join the alliance opposing the respondent. It makes sense on one of the rows, but I'm not sure. Okay, it'll always be a Balkan state. What's going on here? Random Balkan state threatened by. Oh, this is. Yeah, okay, so the first thing you do is you see who's there and who they're threatened by. So that's why it's rolled twice. It's not two different nations that are being threatened by a single power. And then the appeal is there. Okay, it's making sense now. The wording isn't helping, but whatever. While the threatening powers will join the alliance opposing the respondent, players then place the ally markers in the appropriate Balkan powers to determine who will control those powers during the Great War. Balkan powers can switch their allies at this point. The Balkan Wars card, okay, this is an example. Some crisis table results will be impossible. An example would be if the bordering nation result is rolled and all the powers bordering the targeted player are allied to that power. Yeah, maybe, but remember the Balkan states exemption. If any impossible result like this occurs, a member of the opposing alliance is blamed and the GW still occurs. Such results are purely narrative anyway. Great, okay. Neutral players joining an alliance during the crisis roll. Under certain circumstances, neutral players will be forced to enter an alliance as a result of a crisis roll. This occurs whenever a neutral player is targeted by the inciting event, or if they're involved in the crisis table result. Specifically, those circumstances are assassination against the neutral, if the neutral threatened Balkans, if a neutral is the respondent during a Balkan Wars. And remember, you don't get to control this. You don't get to do the entry into war diplomacy at all. It's just forced on you. And you can make some arguments in favor of that. I don't know. It just isn't that kind of game, where you're cutting deals with people. In fact, you don't really get to control your own alliances because of that thing. Other people can push you in places. So I don't know who you are, but whoever you are, whoever you represent, you're not really in control of your country, right? This can make some sense in some countries. For example, you might be the governing faction in one of the democracies, but your government might fall, and be reorganized. And then you still play them just as someone with a different mindset, sort of. It's a lot harder to convince me that the Kaiser, for example, wouldn't be able to determine his own diplomacy. But maybe you're being convinced by other factors. I don't know. But certainly you're not sitting, as a single person throughout the game, for whatever that might matter. It doesn't to me. But I like to be able to feel like I'm some person, some party, some group actor, and I feel like this is going to feel kind of like I'm being buffeted around. Anyway, where are we? A neutral player was involved in the Bosnian crisis, Moroccan crisis, Arabi, if you're rolled on the impulsive leader crisis. Okay. At the end of the crisis roll procedure, shift the associated neutral player into their alliance. If only one neutral player is drawn into the GW, that player freely chooses which alliance they shift into. They cannot, however, choose an alliance that has more players than the opposing alliance, and they cannot choose an alliance that already contains 3 players. If multiple neutrals are drawn at this time, randomly determine which ones go into which alliances. So I've got some real iffies here, which is if like a Balkan state, which can change alliance, and a neutral player get pushed in at the same time, does the neutral player have some agency which alliance they fix to and force the Balkan, or does the Balkan states pre-existing alliance, which could change under some circumstances, does that not change and force the situation? And I don't know. All right, we're stopping there. We barely got anywhere, but I can't cope right now. I don't know if it's... We'll be getting into the military side of things, so that'll be easier. Got this binder here to hold things up because this is one of those one-piece boards. Unlike the GMT ones, it doesn't hold together as well, and there's a little bit of difference in height. Basically, this table is all fucked up. It was a beer pong table or something. Here we are, Thursday night, already dark. To me, that's night. My sleep schedule dictating these horrors on me. It just kind of intrinsically happens. I don't know. I thought the nap that I took yesterday would mean I don't sleep all that late today. Well, I managed to get a good 8 hours in, and that... if I go dancing tomorrow, it makes sense. All right, the Great War itself. The Great War is going to be 5 turns, 6 turns if you count turn 0. And it's just the ending of the game if it ends in a Great War. Okay. Remember the victory conditions from the prior video where the winners of the Great War collectively win the game. So everything's at stake in it. Presuming there's no neutral who can out-victory them. The outbreak step. You discard all your whatever these are called. This is called a home card. I don't want to go... Look, this looks like it would be one. Action cards. Form the official alliances, put the U.S. in a neutral box, and reveal and score any national goals. Remember, points are important. The Great War isn't the only determining factor. National will step, I don't know what that is. We'll get to that, I guess. And set the Great War turn order. Draw Great War card. That sounds like a single card. Flip face down Great War combat cards. Yeah, this may be cards instead. Set the war budget, which will be your industry and your colonial war bonus. I don't know what that is. And give, I guess optionally, give one of your command points to an ally. In Great War turn order, the players conduct up to 1 CP, 1 command point of actions. And then you go to winter, you check for blockade, U.S. blockade, which probably increases their chance of entry. The colonial war, guess we're going to be handling stuff here in a more abstract fashion. Neutrals can join or give a CP to another player, and then go back to the planning step. Okay. Outbreak is done only in turn 0. All right, first of all, you discard all your remaining action cards, including home card. These will not be used during the Great War, and a specific instance where the mandatory events will not trigger. That's more a clarification. I wouldn't have assumed they did, but I could see why people would. Players then determine the opposing alliances. All players in the alliance automatically join the Great War with their fellow members, regardless of whether they are aligned or committed. Neutral players will not immediately join, but they may later, and now the U.S. alliance chit goes in the neutral box, finally. Do not put the U.S. Alliance chit if the Confederates won the Civil War or if it's ongoing. Oh, my eyes are giving me trouble. Minor power allies will not join the Great War at this time. They will only join via certain special crisis table results or the minor power entry Great War card. Historically, other than Belgium and Serbia, who were attacked, nobody entered right away. Japan entered relatively early, and this is the Great War entry card. This does not make minor power allies useless. The Great War entry card cannot allow a minor power to attack its pre-Great War player ally unless it's a Balkan minor power. Okay. In the rare event that no players are in an alliance, if one alliance has players in it but the other does not, the alliance with players declares war on a player of their choice that is not in their alliance. Roll a die to break any disputes. That's pretty vague. So, like, let's say France and Russia are in one alliance and nobody's in the other. And let's say France wants to declare war on Germany. Germany wants to declare war on Austria or Turkey. Okay, that's simple. It's a two-sided thing. Let's say it's a three-sided war. Let's say France, Russia, and Turkey are in an alliance. France wants to attack Germany. Russia and Turkey both want to attack Austria. Well, is it a 50-50 chance, or is it a 1/3, 2/3? I kind of lean towards the other, and I guess it's not a big deal. This is an incredibly rare situation. Not only would this happen, which seems to be rare, but also that the players can't decide as well. But shift the chosen player into the opposing alliance committed boxes and proceed with the outbreak. In the unlikely event that neither alliance has a player in it, you roll a die and get two powers that go to war. It kind of doesn't matter what alliance they're in because nobody else is in it. Italy. If Italy is in the neutral box, it does not join the Great War during the outbreak step. If it's in an aligned alliance box, a die is rolled to see if Italy joins the war. On a 4 or higher, Italy joins the Great War, but if the roll is 3 or less, they shift to the neutral box and do not join the war at this time. And this is very historical. They were technically aligned with the Triple Alliance. However, if Italy is in a committed alliance box, it automatically joins the Great War with that alliance. Makes sense. If Italy is not unified, this rule doesn't apply. Exception. If Italy is blamed for the inciting incident, it will join the Great War. Yeah. Being blamed, you are definitely, even if you're not at cause for the war, certainly you have to be in the initial stages. Entering the Great War at 0 stability. If you have 0 stability, you gain a point. Okay, score the NGs. You reveal all your national goals. Your score can be modified by current stability, negative victory point, national characteristics, in the case of Germany and Russia. If the Great War occurs early, it's possible for players to have less than 3 NGs. If this happens, all players with less than 3 draw 3 more and choose one to keep. And they're not going to get to look at those as future goals, so they can kind of assess them pretty easily. And this gets repeated until they have 3 NGs to score. At this point, players get bonuses for the Great War based on their victory points. Okay, so it's Possible elite core, but also something called display track boosts, which I'm guessing are things like industry or something. ECs gained are attached to and likewise deployed with. I'm getting so much glare. Reserve armies in play. Real paper doesn't glare. And likewise deployed with reserve armies in players' reserve armies holding box. Each display track boost increases your stability, manpower, or industry by 1. Players can boost any track but can't boost the same track twice. Players receive their bonuses during the national will step and turn order each time a player boosts. Okay, so this is interesting. What turn order? Is it the Great War turn order or the prior turn order? I'm guessing it's the Great War, but is that even decided yet? It's not even decided yet, so it's going to be normal turn order. Okay. Oh, where the fuck am I? Each time a player boosts a track that is already maxed out, they place a bonus reserve army in their reserve army's holding box. These can exceed your normal holding box limit, but not the countermix. Okay. That's going to be a hard decision. You know, is it better to boost a track or to boost, one where you get an advantage? Stability keeps you in the war. What are they? Stability, manpower, and industry. Manpower, I don't remember entirely what it does, but obviously you can kind of view what it would do. And industry is, I think, improves the amount of command points you get. I'm not sure again. But they're all good things, but on the other hand, maybe more armies is a better thing, although they're reserved. UK Special National Will. A UK elite corps gain. I always have trouble dealing with an acronym. No, I can't. Acronyms. Brain is getting old. Gained during the National Will Step is attached to an on-map army of their choice. Since the UK doesn't have reserve armies, each reserve army gained by the UK is placed in London during the GW Turn 1 planning step. Now that's during Turn 1. Until that point, those armies are placed in the UK's event holding box on their player display. Place the UK's Join Your Country army counter on those units as a reminder. Okay. I'm not sure, because there would be no other reason there are armies in the event box, but whatever. Remove pacification markers. At the end of the National Will Step, you remove all pacification markers from the board. They will no longer be needed. Set the turn order for the Great War. The alliances are going to alternate impulses. Each alliance sets their turn order for the entirety of the GW. Alliance that has the German player will always go first, although the German doesn't have to get the first impulse. The alliances set their turn order secretly and reveal them simultaneously. Alliances members can and are encouraged to consult each other when determining the Great War turn order. If they cannot decide, use a die roll to determine the order. Mark the turn order by placing their wartime initiative over there. If the German player is neutral, the alliance with the UK goes first, then the alliance with France, then Austria, then Russia. Neutral powers go after all those participating in the Great War. Bonus impulses. If one alliance has fewer players, that alliance gets a bonus impulses. Any alliance member can act during a bonus impulse, but only one player is allowed to act. Additionally, during a bonus impulse, players are always allowed to pass without spending any CP in their CP war budget, even if they wouldn't be allowed to pass normally. To mark this, place a bonus impulse chit in the appropriate slot. So basically, if one alliance is larger than the other, let's say we have a three-person to a one-person alliance. Okay. Let's say whole triple entente against Germany. Germany would go first, then say France, then a bonus chit, which Germany can use if they want, then say Russia, then another bonus chit, then the UK. This is so that everybody gets the same number of turns, but you're only going to have a certain number of CPs anyway. All right, we're going to stop there because I'm struggling again with the reading of the rules. I don't know what's going on for me. Let's continue our pushing through this thing. Planning step, and again, this happens in every Great War turn. The outbreak step was what we just did. That only happens in turn 0. I don't know why the numbering starts at 0 instead of going 6 turns. It may have to do with a year type thing, and this may be accelerated stuff. I don't know. But you do a full turn, it's just it has the outbreak step in it for turn 0, as far as I can tell. And there's nothing special about it other than that. Fuck. All right, the standard action deck and player home cards are not used during the Great War. Still, you use the Great War deck. At the start of your planning step, or of the planning step, reshuffle the Great War discard pile into the card deck and deal all players, including neutral players, 1 Great War card. These function differently from the standard action cards, and all players have a Great War hand limit of 1. They're allowed to hold their Great War card until the next turn, but if they do so, they don't get a new card. Now, let's take a peek at what these look like, because, all right, so they've got an event and they've got a number on them. I think the number is a CP value, but I'm not positive of that. These cards are so weird. You have to feel them to believe them. They are a really odd material. Somewhere we have a place where it showed those 2 cards. There we go. No, that's national goals. Yeah, these look like CP values on them. It's the same symbology. And let's go back. Hold on. This whole Great War section, I'm going to have to reread it. There's no question of that. But I think having a familiarity with it is of some use. And no, I'm not going to reread it to you guys. But anyway. Flip face down GW combat cards. There are 2 combat cards and they function exactly the same. When played for their event, GW combat cards are not placed in the discard pile. Instead, they're placed face down in front of the player they were played against. Once the combat cards have been played for their event, they will never be discarded nor added back to the deck. The cards in front of the players never count towards their hand limit, and a single player is allowed to have both GW combat cards in front of them. During the planning step of each GW turn, the combat cards in front of the player are flipped face up, if not already, and may be used by the player who has them during their turn. After GW combat cards are flipped face up, players may give their GW combat cards to another player in their alliance. GW cards in front of players are public information even when face down. They can be seen and inspected by all players. The only reason they're face down is to signify they can't be used until the following turn. Sounds like whoever uses them is going to have to flip them back down again. This technology, dawn of modern warfare. Now here's a note on this. The First World War was a constant seesaw with each side implementing a new tactic or a new technological terror. And that's these, dawn of modern warfare, technological, I assume it says terror on it. Importantly, once one side thought they had an advantage on the other side, often very quickly developed something to counter or even surpass their opponent's advantage. Perhaps the best example is the development of the airplane. The two cards are meant to model this constant back and forth between the two alliances. That's not what I just read sounds like it's doing. They're not placed in the discard pile. Instead, they're placed face down in front of the player they were played against. Aha! Okay, so you use a combat card against someone. That was the thing I missed in there. And the card is now not available for use by anyone, but on the next Great War turn, it'll be flipped face up, and the other alliance, because they can hand it off, will be able to utilize it to their advantage. So once this is triggered, it's going to be a back and forth type of thing. Of course, you could just hold on to it and prevent that. The CP budget. This is going to be your industry level. Straight up, I guess. Okay. But everybody has a minimum CP budget of 2, even if you have crap industry. Italy has a 2 CP war budget, and the US has an automatic 4 CP, and these are counters for that. I don't know where you track it. All belligerent, I'm assuming the normal budgets are tracked over on, I think this is one of those places where you track it on any track you like on your card. I guess these guys are tracked on an allies card. Where were we? All belligerent players and the US, if it's in the war, can transfer 1 CP to an ally, but they must be able to trace a line of communication to that power. Okay. It's very easy to see how one player makes that decision. I don't know who makes the decision for the US. Maybe we'll see that somewhere. Non-player powers in the GW, should they join the war, US and a unified Italy always go after all player powers in the following order: US, then Italy. Similar to war, and I don't think that they create new dummies or anything, but I'm not sure, because I thought Italy did. Where was that? Set the turn order. Okay, this is all very vague. It does not describe the US or Italy at all. So far I'm leaning to they're just added to the tail of the sequence. This is a little weird. Oh, US Italy is here. Yeah. Now, this is all a little weird because there's 6 players in the game, and the US and Italy with only 1 box for the 2 of them. And everybody gets involved. Like, even neutral players get a turn, I think. Although I don't remember. Yeah, they don't appear to get into the sequence. I don't know. Okay. Similar to wartime actions, all minor powers are moved by their controlling powers. Players may not conduct actions with US or Italian units with CP from their personal budget. However, these units will still participate in a player-launched land battle. That doesn't cost any CP. Maneuver step. During this step, players move their armies and fight battles. Most of the GW rules are similar to the wartime, but there are some differences. You can spend up to 1 CP from your CP war budget to conduct an action, and you have the option of playing your GW war in addition to your action, or you can pass. So you must spend a CP or pass. And if you spend a CP, you can throw your card in. The GW card, players can play their GW cards. Now, the weird thing here is the neutrals have cards. What's up with those? I don't know. Are they just holding them in case they enter the war? I know they get dealt in, they don't seem to get into the wartime initiative order. In addition to their actions, players can play their GW cards in one of two ways: for a bonus action that must be conducted immediately, another CP, or for the card's event, which will occur after the player conducts their action. Unlike a normal turn, GW cards are played in addition to an action, taking CP from their war budget. Exception: GW combat cards that are face up in front of players can never be played for a bonus CP and must always be played for their event. Yeah, I mean, they're not really being played anymore. They're just being bounced around. Exception 2, GW combat events are played at the start of a battle by the player involved in the battle, and GW response cards have specific conditions which must be met in order to be played. Now, this is weird and not clear enough. Again, there was no errata on the stuff I'm seeing here. I got no pencil marks here. Combat events are played at the start of the battle. Does that generate another CP? That seems highly unlikely. And they wouldn't be used for that later once they become a bouncing ball. And GW response cards, well, gosh, I don't know until I look at some of them. In other words, GW combat and response cards work the same as normal combat and response cards. Again, there are cards that have preconditions in the original deck, but the response cards, I think, are all things that just are they're triggered and you can play them, and they don't give you any CPs. I think when using their GW card for a bonus action, players are not allowed to conduct the same action twice or conduct a land battle action during their impulse. Any land battle. Well, okay. Exception: the free German deploy reserves action does not count for the purpose of this rule. So in other words, the German player may deploy reserves twice and presumably fight battle if they want it instead. GW mandatory events. There's only one mandatory event in the GW deck: exhaustion. Similar to normal mandatory events, playing exhaustion triggers its event and gives the active player a bonus CP to spend. Additionally, similar to a normal turn, players cannot pass with an exhaustion card in their hand. This is really weird because, well, I'm assuming it doesn't affect the bonus impulses. I'm assuming you can pass on them no matter what. Again, lots of intricate things and interrelations between stuff that really isn't being spelled out, and you're going to have to interpolate it seems, more than I like. This is getting, as we get into the Great War section, which is really the most untouched, like the most new part of the system, we're seeing it's getting as shaky as some of those other CDGs that, again, were based on Here I Stand. More so than this is, but anyway. Where are we? However, players are not obliged to immediately play exhaustion, but they must do so at some point during their turn, and it must be played in addition to their Great War action. So that implies that you can't spend your last CP until without playing it. And well, you're only going to have one GW card. You must play it before your budget reaches 0. Yeah. Neutral player GW impulses. After all belligerents have gone, neutral players in normal turn order may play their GW card for its event. Okay, so here's where they're implicated. GW actions. During their impulse, players can take the following actions. Deploy reserves. Okay, we got a whole list of things. We'll hit them as we go. They are not in the same order. Interesting. So deploy reserves drops us to 15.2.3. That's going to be, I guess, the normal rules for deploying reserves during a war is the issue here. Land battle, similarly. Rail movement, similarly. March, naval movement, joint naval operations, these are all working there. But now we hit refit fleet. We have an asterisk on that, which is undefined. No, here it is. Actions, the glare is killing me. Actions marked with an asterisk can only be taken during the Great War and are not standard wartime actions. Okay. So from now on, we're hitting asterisk actions and we have special rules. So we'll just drop down. Refit costs 1 CP. All of these are going to cost you 1 because you don't have more than 1. Flip an army with a line of communications from its reduced side to its full side. This is interesting. You can't restore troops during the normal wars. Draft, 1 CP and 1 manpower. You actually spend a manpower during the GW to do this. Gain 2 reduced armies. This is the only way to build new armies. These armies must be placed in controlled home keys, no more than 1 per space, following normal recruitment. They cannot be placed in spaces containing a trench battle marker. When you take a draft, instead of placing 2 reduced armies, you can substitute 1 expeditionary force for an army. This can be placed in a controlled home key or in a controlled colonial home key with a line of communication. In both cases, the space cannot contain a trench marker. Players can also rebuild elite colonial EFs in this manner. Likewise, the French player can rebuild the Zouaves. Okay, this is all kind of painful. One thing it's not noting, maybe later on it does, is it doesn't seem to make a distinction between regular armies and reserves, that I can just build up anything. But I do have a manpower limit. Substituting an EF for an army is usually not a good idea. However, in certain cases, especially taking into account colonial war rules, it can be beneficial. Okay. Well, I don't know. Players may also substitute an allied minor power army for one of their own armies during a draft action. Allied minor power armies must be built in a home space belonging to that minor. The UK may draft armies under their Join Your Country's Army marker, but doing so brings those armies in at reduced strength. We don't know how they come in otherwise. It's probably in the UK special rules. Can they draft armies that aren't under there? Remember, deploy reserves is how I get my reserve armies. So it seems kind of weird that Join Your Army counters felt like they're kind of this special reserve army for the Brits. I'm assuming if I have additional British armies, I could draft those instead. But I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm not sure. Elite Corps, this costs 1 CP. Gain 1 Elite Corps. Remember, here it was expeditionary forces I'm allowed to build. Here it's an Elite Corps. This also gives me 2. This only gives me 1. Of course, this takes manpower, this does not. The Elite Corps must be placed with a friendly army with a line of communication. It does not need to be placed in a home space. Yes, it's cheaper to build an Elite Corps during the Great War than during the action phase. What did it cost me in the action phase? I think 2. I'm not sure. I'm not worried about it. Damned if I remember things like this. Like, this is a note that I'm like, yeah, okay. Refit fleet, you flip it over if it's in a friendly port from reduced to full strength. Manpower, finite resource. When a player's manpower becomes 0, it is exhausted. A player with an exhausted manpower cannot build any new armies and gets a -1 modifier for both land and naval battles for the rest of the GW. Players should weigh their options carefully when choosing step losses in the Great War. Consider this: having all reduced armies in a space gets a -1 modifier in battle. Eliminating a reduced army to preserve a full-strength army, and thus avoiding the negative, may be a wise decision at the time, but refitting armies doesn't take manpower. Building new armies does. Okay? Important. Remember, the number of players on map standing armies is limited only by their manpower during peacetime. In other words, players on map armies, both standing and reserve, are not limited by a player's manpower during the Great War. Ending a Great War turn, a maneuver step ends when all players consecutively pass or when everybody's war budget reaches 0. And I'm fatigued. Reading these rules is really taking a lot out of me comparatively, I think. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Compared to like Distant Foreign Fields and War and Peace recently, I felt like those were pretty taxing too. So it may just be me that I'm like having a harder and harder time coping, but I feel like I have to leave more often. And I mean, War and Peace, I knew those rules, man, long ago. This is not a... All right, so back up here to the Great War combat. Now, there's some interesting things here because there are cards in the base game, the hydraulic suspension or whatever it is, and the machine guns, which affect combat across the board. But those might not have happened outside before the Great War. It's possible the Great War could start before those cards get triggered. Which creates an interesting situation where their abilities, their impact isn't felt, but like you're in this period still of hyper technology represented by those 2 combat cards. I think the combat system is abstract enough that it doesn't matter, right? It's not like a La Grande Guerre type game. But it does, at least in my mind, hold kind of a, we're in this period of hyper improvement due to the Great War, and nobody's going to discover these really significant pieces, but they're just not formally discovered. Yeah, the combat will be different, but trenches come in automatically here. For the most part, the combat is going to be based on the minor wars that happened prior to the Great War. Trenches, at the start of game turn 1, all keys automatically contain trenches. Now, this might seem a little weird until you realize that all the western spaces are keys, and much of the east is in keys as well. You have to realize, though, that the East Front was entirely entrenched eventually. Even spaces that we're not counting as keys. Okay, let's keep going. Now, remember there is a Great War at turn 0. Okay, so turn 0 is sort of the early part of 1914, where the mobile war was still in play. And that may be why it's turn 0, to remind you that the trenches aren't there yet. Players are only allowed to attack a trench if they have a full-strength army in their main attack force. Usually a good idea anyway. Additionally, regardless of the outcome of the battle, the attacker will suffer an additional step loss for attacking a trench space. It's not making them harder to take, it's making them more painful. From game turn 1 onward, trench battles will occur in spaces containing trenches. During a trench battle, special rules apply. And what's also odd here is areas where the entrenchment were very, very light. Maybe kind of didn't exist at all, like Arabia. Okay, that's not going to have a trench, but let's say Palestine. Honestly, it wasn't the same kind of trench warfare that it was in either the East or West. Yet it's going to be treated the same. Anyway, lack of troops might be enough. A trench battle is initiated by an army or armies attacking into a space containing trenches. If that initial attack is successful, instead of the defender retreating, the attacker advances into the space and a trench battle marker is placed on the attacker's stack. flip to the attacker's advantage side. Now remember, they're also taking an additional step loss coming in. It's going to be really hard to take things. Trench battles have 3 statuses. These are marked with counters, attacker advantage, deadlock, and defender advantage. They have numbers on them, and that's in case you want to track the trench battles over here. Because otherwise you're going to have 2 stacks in every space where there's a trench battle in place. For clarity, the term defender will refer to the power that occupied the hex before the trench battle was initiated. The attacker will be the power that attacked into the space. This is important because after the attacker has entered the space, both the attacker and the defender can launch attacks. I'm assuming the rules up here under trenches, you're only allowed to attack a trench if you have a full strength army and your main attack force, and you take the extra step loss. Happen anyway. It's not just the cost to enter the hex. If either the attacker or defender force the other to retreat by launching a successful attack, the status is shifted in favor of their side. An unsuccessful attack does not alter the status. A deadlock is when a player who had the advantage are forced to retreat. They're not forced to retreat, but when they normally would be. If the attacker or defender have the advantage and force their opponent to retreat, their opponent must retreat from this space. You can see the wording is painful here, right? To help players keep track of who the attacker was, the status counter should be placed on top of the attacker's armies. Alternately, the players can use the trench battle holding boxes, which will show who the attacker was as well. As with normal land battles, the powers initiating the attack still win ties, though. Land battle actions and trench battles. Only units in a given trench battle space can initiate a land battle in that space. Adjacent armies cannot initiate it. Support in trench battles. If supporting units are in a trench battle, their supporting FP is halved. Remember, the unit's FP can only be halved once. Additionally, all units supporting a trench battle are automatically adjacent to both the attacker and defender space. Remember, that limits how many armies can join in because they're both the same space. But something about trench battles, I think, limited. If they're in a trench battle themselves, only one of them can go in. So kind of negates that advantage largely. Decisive battles and trench battles. Decisive battles and trench battles have no further effect apart from the stability loss for the losing side. Well, this is new. Now, we have the reference to it, which is what convinces me of this, which is 30. We'll get to that in a moment. Exception, if the attacker won a decisive battle and the main defense force is completely eliminated, the attacker may then conduct the normal decisive battle's advantages. Let's look at what this is here. So this is really weird. Like, it's referring me to where something is said, where that something could have been said for the cost here, just about for the same amount of words. Anyway. All right. Oh, boy, this is going to take a lot of looking into the rules to try to play it close to right. I can see it already. Movement in trenches. In wartime, players must win a land battle to enter spaces containing enemy units. However, when a space contains a trench battle marker, it may be moved into and out of during the march and or rail actions. However, again, when units leave a trench battle space, for the first space they enter cannot be an enemy-controlled or occupied space unless it also contains a trench battle marker. When a side completely vacates a trench battle space, the trench battle marker is removed and the opposing player immediately occupies or retains control of the space. Okay. All of this is so you can't just since you're both occupying the same area or point, you can't just push through the trench space. It's very similar to mechanisms in place in the Great War, the ancient Rand game that I covered a long time ago. If a port space contains a trench battle marker, players can use naval movement actions to move a land unit directly into or out of that space. They do not need to conduct an amphibious assault. I don't know, can they both, like, station their navies there? I guess. I don't know. Not covered. Forts in Great War combat. Forts still provide firepower to the defender as in pre-war combat. They can defend trench battle spaces even if no other friendly units are present. During a trench battle, forts can defend a space even if no other friendly units are present. Additionally, prior to Great War turn 1, if a player is forced to retreat, they may remove a friendly fort from the space to cancel the result. This wasn't possible back in... So this is really weird. Like, for one turn, forts provide you with a retreat exemption. A fort cannot cancel the retreat if the space contains no units. A fort is not a unit. Likewise, if all defending units are eliminated, the defender cannot cancel the retreat. Okay, this is all worded kind of weirdly so far, because the forts are able to defend on their own once it becomes a trench battle. I don't know. Gosh. But then there's this reminder it's not a unit. Okay, whatever, but... during the Great War, if a defending fort remains in a space after a battle, it automatically reduces by 1 level. Ugh. This happens after the decision to remove the fort to cancel a retreat, which can only happen on GW turn 0, I guess, because there's no such rule in the basic stuff. I really wish it specified only on Great War turn 0 instead of this prior to Great War turn 1, which sounds so much like it should apply to the earlier stuff. Like, forts are really unimpressive until the Great War, and then they're only briefly really impressive. I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Exception, the India fort cannot be removed to cancel a retreat. Okay. All right. The winter step. This happens at the end of each Great War turn, I guess. Looks like it. Blockade. A player is blockaded if they can't trace a line of communication from their capital to any naval box except the Baltic Sea or Black Sea. Players can trace through the Baltic Sea and Black Sea, ending their trace in another box in order to not be blockaded. So Russia is just going to be blockaded, I think, right? Well, we're not sure. But it looks easy to do so. At the end of each war of the Great War, not Great War turn 0 because it doesn't represent an end of a year, decrease the maximum industry level of every blockaded player by 1. This cannot reduce their industry below 3, though. Exception. For purpose of this rule, the Russian player can only trace a line of communication to the Pacific Ocean if the Trans-Siberian Railroad is completed. And oh boy, if that's their only source of supply, okay, Russia's not automatically blockaded because of that. But if that's their only source of real supply, I'm very troubled. I guess the combination of the Pacific supply and the Archangel supply during the summer might make up for something. Whatever. Okay. Now, Germany is going to be blockaded, which makes sense. Austria is probably going to... I'm looking at the historical situation. Germany and Austria will be blockaded. Britain, obviously not. We haven't gotten to subs yet. Where are we? The U.S. in the blockade. If the U.S. is fighting in the Great War, check if the North Atlantic naval box is occupied by enemy naval units. If it is, the U.S. loses a stability. The colonial war. The war in Africa and Asia is abstracted to two die rolls at the end of a Great War turn. The African and Asian colonial wars are resolved separately. Both alliances make an opposed die roll. Each EF on the continent gives +1. Now there's an asterisk here. Only count units on Africa or Asia. Okay, I'm really confused here. They're done separately. Okay. +1 per elite unit on the continent. Elite colonial EFs provide a total of +2. +1 per army on the continent. Yeah, that's a painful thing to commit to. +2 for naval supremacy. An alliance has naval supremacy in Africa if the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean only contain units from their alliance. An alliance has naval supremacy in Asia if the Pacific and Indian only contain units from their alliance. Wow, the Indian Ocean is important. Like in a battle, players only need to calculate the difference between each other's modifiers and then give one player the bonus. Yeah. Colonial war results. One alliance's total is greater than their opponent's total. The losing players eliminate one of their units or one army step on the respective submap. The winning player then may take control of one unoccupied space on the respective submap. They must be able to trace a line of communication to their chosen space. I don't remember anything in the Great War rules saying you can't move in combat on these maps as well. It seems like a really bad idea, but maybe with the trench warfare and whatnot, this is actually the more effective place to pursue your goals. I'm not sure. If one alliance's total is greater than the opponent's total by 4 or more, the losing players eliminate 2 of their units, or 2 steps. The winning player takes control of 2 unoccupied spaces on the respective submap. If an alliance controls a colonial continent, that'll be in the next rule, it says, treat the other alliance's roll as 0 during this step. A roll is still made as the colonial war has important stability effects for certain players. See next point. This looks like the next rule. It should have both of these factors in it. Okay. If the UK alliance loses a colonial war roll, the UK loses a stability. Russia's alliance checks in the following spaces: Central Asia, Qajar, Persia, and Manchuria. If at least 2 of those spaces are enemy controlled, Russia loses a stability. Now Russia's going to have a hard time contesting things here, huh? Oh. Take a look at the movement. Okay. March is the exact same rules as in the regular game. Land battle, exact same rules. So I think, yes, you can use your normal CPs to fight out the colonial battles if you wish and give yourself an added advantage in the colonial war. Okay, where were we? Russia. Okay. If one alliance controls all the spaces on either Africa or Asia, they gain a bonus CP during the planning step. If one alliance controls all the spaces on both, they gain 3 bonus CPs during the planning step. Do not count neutral spaces when determining control. These bonus CPs must be divided up among the alliance members who are not blockaded. Every alliance member does not receive 1 or 3 bonus or CP. Okay, yeah. If players cannot come to an agreement on how to allocate them, they're all lost. Players are in no way prevented from conducting actions on the submaps, and in many cases, especially for UK and Russia, it may be advantageous to do so. Cool. The colonial war rules are meant to ensure that the war in the colonies is resolved without them having to commit their CPs. Additionally, the bonus CPs from the colonial war are meant to model extra resources coming in from them. I'm really glad for that note, because that's one of those things where I felt like I was interpolating a rule and not sure it was correct. Of course, the note may have been in my mind from reading before. Neutral powers in the Great War. At this point, the neutral player powers, may shift their alliance chit into an alliance space. If there are multiple neutral players, they each roll 1 die to see who chooses first. Players cannot shift into an alliance that has 3 players or into an alliance that contains more players than the opposing alliance. Once a player shifts into an alliance, they immediately join that alliance and are no longer considered neutral. If a neutral player joins an alliance, they may immediately conduct a free redeployment action, a free deploy reserves action, and they are placed in the next available space in the GW turn order. This will always be the lowest number in the GW turn order not occupied by a player. So note, there's already a dummy counter, whatever, the wild cards. You've just gone into another space. We'll see what happens, if anything changes due to that. If a player is eliminated from the game during a GW, they no longer count as being in the alliance, meaning player elimination may affect which alliance neutral players are allowed to join. Additionally, a neutral player entering the GW will cause the opposing alliance to gain a bonus impulse. You give me italics like this, and it seems less important, like I feel like I'm reading an example of play or something. I've said this before in other games. I don't... Yeah, see here, the example is all in italics. This is not a good way to do an important role, to give it the same kind of status as textually as the... Anyway, where are we? Additionally, entering will cause the opposing alliance to gain a bonus impulse if that alliance is now outnumbered by the number of players in the alliance the neutral player joined. Conversely, if a neutral player joins an alliance that has a bonus impulse, the bonus impulse marker is removed. Okay, so we negate something. Now, where did we just get placed? We got placed in the next available spot. So we're going to be going to the tail of the initiative order. That may end up meaning that we no longer have every other turn going, as I read things. You don't just replace a bonus impulse. You get put at the tail and a bonus impulse gets removed. Or you get put at the tail and then a bonus impulse is possibly added, which again might not be in the same order that you think it's going to be, that it was at the start. Okay. I hope that makes sense. It does in my head, but I know I'm expressing it poorly. If a neutral player decides not to join an alliance, they may take a free redeployment action. Neutral players may then give a bonus CP to a belligerent power if they can trace a line of communication to that power's capital. This is important because you might want to help a side not lose, because a neutral player will win the game if both sides if the war is not concluded. This line of communication cannot be traced through enemy-controlled spaces, neutral spaces, or naval boxes containing naval units. In this case, enemy refers to the enemies of the player getting the CP, not the neutral power. Let's think for a moment. So I could see a neutral sitting out and handing resources out to one side and then changing to the other side as the balance of power changes. This is a very intriguing situation. The closest thing we have to a neutral power in the historical example is the US. All the player great powers entered relatively early. Turkey took a little bit of time. Britain essentially was pulled into the alliance. I mean, if you honestly wanted to do this, historically represent what happened, Britain had an alliance with Belgium and were brought into the war by the German invasion of Belgium, thereby a declaration of war or whatever. We're not sure how that's handled. Like, could the German units just march into Belgium and force a maybe neutral Britain? One can argue different ways based on that. And everybody else, Austria, Russia, France, and Germany, they all just declared war and started preparing. Britain was already preparing. So there's some question, would the Brits have entered? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to pause for a bit because there's only so much of this I can take at a time. It's like explain. This is a problem I have with the CDGs in particular. It's like going through, and I would say Levian campaign hits me in similar ways. Coin is a different creature entirely for the most part until you start getting to the stupidly ultra, like too much weight being put on them. Things like Pendragon. I liked Pendragon. But, yeah, which is that I feel like I'm trying to learn the rules to a hyper-complex Euro. Because a lot of this stuff, yeah, it makes some sense, but it doesn't directly link. And I don't know if that's just, a matter of familiarity with the old war games and these new concepts are just not gelling quite the same way. Why I say Coin's a different creature entirely is the actual rules to Coin are pretty light. What's not is the menu of things you can choose to do. That's where all the complexity is, and that's where you start. For most of them, Pendragon is the definite exception there, I think. All right, let's cut through some more. The Great War ends immediately when an alliance is defeated. All powers of the alliance have to be eliminated, or there's only one power remaining in an alliance and there are no neutral players. I guess. I see a problem. Well, there would be neutral players under those kind of circumstances. Okay. If neither alliance has won the Great War, it automatically ends at the end of the Great War turn 5. In which case, the neutral players with highest victory point total win. If there's no neutrals, whoever has the highest stability wins. All right. Tons of special rules for various stuff. The Great War special rules are pretty limited. When the U.S. joins the Great War, this is talking about something as if we already have rules for how this happens. I don't know where we do. I sure don't remember anything. And this is part of what's so frustrating, is I keep reading things and being like, yeah, what? Add 3 U.S. armies and all 4 U.S. naval units to the South Space. Only 2 naval units if the Dreadnoughts hasn't been played. The U.S. only receives 1 CP to spend on the turn it enters. If Mexico and or Canada are now enemies of the U.S., the U.S. or U.S. allies must first occupy both, or only one of them if only one is enemy-controlled, before U.S. armies can leave the North American submap. Only the U.S. can have units in the south, and thus the U.S. can never be invaded. The U.S. has 3 stability, 3 manpower, and 4 CP. I don't know what the stability matters. Or where it's tracked. To spend per turn, except the turn they enter. Decrease U.S. stability by 1 whenever a U.S. army is eliminated. A U.S.-led force suffers a defeat in a decisive battle, or if the North Atlantic naval box contains enemy units during the winter step. Once the U.S. joins the Great War, it will not switch sides or leave the war unless forced to surrender. Italy in the Great War. When Italy enters the Great War, we know how that happens. We've got no idea with the U.S. Now, maybe there's a card in the Great War thing that does it. I don't know. Honestly, like the U.S. was partially in the war before they were putting troops, which, anyway, just like in World War II. Set the Italian to 3 stability, 3 manpower, and they receive 2 CP per Great War turn. Decrease their stability by 1 whenever an enemy power occupies an Italian home key, or whenever an Italian-led force suffers a defeat in a decisive battle. Increase Italian stability by 1 if an Italian home key is retaken by a friendly power. Once Italy joins the Great War, it will not switch sides nor leave the war unless forced to surrender. Now, there's some weird stuff here, right? We have stability in the Great War. Losing a controlled territorial key or a home key, recapturing, suffering a defeat in a decisive battle. If it's got at least 2 armies. Did we just miss this? I don't know. I think we did. I think we skipped over all this. Losing a dreadnought in battle, certain colonial results for the UK and Russia. When a player surrenders, they're eliminated from the game. A player immediately surrenders when their stability reaches 0 or if their capital is occupied. Exception, Austro-Russian. Ottomans have a capital and a sub-capital. You have to take them both. Yeah, we missed all this. If any of the eliminated player's allies were actively fighting in the Great War, replace the eliminated player's ally marker with an ally marker belonging to a member of their alliance. They stay in the war. That other player now controls the minor powers units. If there's 2 remaining powers in the alliance and they cannot agree, use a die roll. When a player surrenders, remove the following markers from play: all their units, their marker on the alliance track, their wartime initiative, and all their ally markers on minor powers. Lastly, replace the eliminated player's space on the wartime initiative with a bonus income impulse for their alliance. Exception, only one alliance can have a bonus impulse. If player elimination would have both players have bonus impulse, instead remove 2, 1 of each, and move all player initiative up the track. After a player is eliminated, other players may freely march through their territory, but all spaces formerly controlled by the eliminated power must be occupied before players may rail through them. Okay. All right. Something about these rules is really hitting me really hard, and I've tried to grasp what. Okay, so where are we? Attacking neutral players. Players cannot attack neutral players. They can, however, attack minor and major powers. Yeah. So they talk about it as an unlikely choice to just like go slam into some other major power. I could see it if you know they're aligning already. And here, however, this rule is mainly meant to balance the game by preventing players from attacking neutral players merely because the neutral player is winning on victory points. Yes, Russia and UK attacked the Ottomans at the end of 1914, but this was after they sheltered warships. Okay. Attacking neutral non-player powers. Players can declare war on non-player powers at any point during their impulse. When this happens, a player from the opposing alliance immediately places an alliance marker. If they can't agree who gets it, roll a die. If a neutral player is allied to or has a diplomacy marker in the attacked power's space, the neutral player has the option. If a neutral player is allied to or has diplomacy in the attack power space, yeah, so like on a minor, that neutral player has the option to immediately join the GW with the opposing alliance. The opposing alliance in this case is the one that didn't attack. Rebels in the Great War. At the start of the Great War, if a space has rebels and player units, the player units immediately displace. Unlike rebels prior to the Great War, rebel and non-rebel cannot coexist in the same space during the Great War. And this is so confusing because, like, most of the war rules are over in that other section, so I'm like, oh, I thought they could, you know. It's confusing in the way that programmed instruction games are confusing, where they, like, give you rules. Not all programmed instruction are this way, but I'm thinking particularly like Magic Realm here, where it gives you rules and then withdraws them and replaces them with other rules, and it's just, fuck, don't do this to me. But this game, it's actually, you know, meant to simulate something. I'm not sure what. Maybe difficulties dealing with the trench warfare if they're together. Additionally, active rebels are hostile to all powers involved in the Great War, and they will never join the Great War. Rebel spaces never contain trenches. That's kind of interesting because I think both enemies... No, nobody can be in it. Okay. All right, fair enough. The information sideboard, I already talked about this. There's not much to say. National characteristics. Okay. These are the special rules per country. And that is pretty much the end of the boat. So let's start taking a look at some of these and trying to pronounce some of them. Germans. This is why I joked. Bewegungskrieg. Wins all ties when determining initiative at the start of a war. Additionally, during the Great War, Germany's alliance always goes first. I'm not sure that's an advantage, but whatever. Superior staff work. During Germany's first impulse of the war or Great War, they may conduct one free deploy reserves action in addition to whatever else they do in that first impulse. German Confederation. After Germany wins a war of unification, they may take control of one of their German minor allies, including one they just gained through realignment. Eligible minor powers include Bavaria, Saxony, and Hanover. I guess that's all it limits to. Well, that's all of them. Schleswig-Holstein is something special. When Germany takes control of a German minor power in such a way, the following happens. They place a control marker in the minor space, the minor power's units are removed, and the minor power is permanently eliminated from the game. Whenever Germany takes control of a German unification space, it becomes a permanent home space. Not really the Confederation. This is actually sort of this is Prussia absorbing stuff, essentially. Blood and Iron. During the end phase of turn 1, instead of drawing national goals, Prussia can just take the unification card. If they do it, they must play it face up so that everybody can see what they're, that they made that choice. Imperial Germany. When Germany unifies, Germany gains +1 manpower during the end phase. It's a one-time bonus, and it can occur whether or not Germany took the unification goal. Continental Focus. Until Germany unifies, their naval counter is limited to 2 squadrons and 2 dreadnoughts, and their pacification actions cost 2 CP. Yeah, Prussia really wasn't too interested in the rest of the world. Zelveren. German unification spaces are always considered territorial keys to the German player. I don't know what that means. Like, all keys are territorial keys. They're all keys. I don't know what this is trying to tell me. I'm going to try it. Like, I feel like it's trying to tell me something different than this. And German unification spaces are always considered territorial keys to the German player. Like, do I have more than I should? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 territorial keys. Like, I really don't understand why this statement is necessary. It would be along the lines of boxes are always considered territorial keys to the French player. Yeah, they're considered territorial keys for everyone. I have no clue what they're trying to say here. And this is the kind of thing where I'm like, do I even understand the game vaguely? Or am I missing some huge concept? I'm going to have to look up territorial keys and see if there's something here. This was not covered in any errata. Okay, I think I've got it. Under territorial keys, keys with a contiguous land connection back to a player's capital. The land connection cannot be traced through neutral or allied spaces. Territorial keys are usually on the main map. What's the difference? This is to handle that Westphalia can't trace to the rest of Prussia. So no matter what minor countries I have, German connected, whatever they're called, German unification spaces, whatever they are, I don't have to actually trace in order to score them here. I think that's what it means. This is a horrible way to say things because, yes, territorial keys do have to trace back. All right. So that was Germany. But there are more special rules. German unification. The German player begins as Prussia and can become the German Empire. Germany becomes the German Empire by unifying Germany. Germany unifies the... It's like each one starts with the words of the last one. The instant Germany controls all German spaces. Alliance and diplomacy markers count as control for German unification. When Germany unifies, Germany immediately takes control of all German unification spaces where they have alliance and diplomacy. So I am going to have to take, notably, not just all the minors, but Alsace-Lorraine in order to unify, which makes sense. Some of these can be taken just with a diplomacy marker, right? Alliance or a diplomacy marker, yeah. Whenever Germany takes control of a German minor power, Saxony, Bavaria, Hanover, that minor power is permanently removed from the game. Returning all its pieces to the game box. This includes when Germany uses the German Confederation national characteristic. What was that? I can take control of a German minor ally. Okay. This is meant to give Germany a lot of flexibility. Okay. UK, professional army. The UK can never build reserve armies. Until the Great War, the UK cannot build any British armies except the First. Prior to the Great War, the British First Army has an innate +1 DRM if it's in the main attack defense force. The British First Army counter is marked with an asterisk to indicate this. This is interesting. I feel like it should be prior to game turn 1. I don't know. There's some argument on just how effective the BEF was, but certainly a lot of games tend to rate the BEF as being, and especially in their first mobile phase of the war, as being a cut above everything else. Join your country's army. The UK places all armies gained during the outbreak step under the join your country's army counter. They say during Great War step turn 1. Outbreak isn't in turn 1. Outbreak is in turn 0. This is clear errata. And nothing. Wait. No, during the outbreak step in London, during the planning step of game turn 1, place. Okay. So in the outbreak step, which is during game turn 0, you place all the armies in London. No, I got it. The UK places all the armies gained during the outbreak step of the General War in turn 0 in London during the planning step of GW turn 1. Place UK's join your country's army counter on these units as a reminder. This still happens if the UK is neutral at this point. I think what this means is I get a pile of troops on game turn 1, and then that marker goes away. It's very confusing, and I don't know, like, there being a counter for this doesn't feel like it helps much. The Indian Army. The UK player can build Indian armies equal to their colonial manpower. Yeah, they have 2 different types of manpower. Indian armies automatically displace to Bengal or India at the end of a turn or at the conclusion of a war that the UK participated in, which means you can't station them in Europe, basically, nor in, like, South Africa or something. Maintaining the status quo. If the UK is the primary belligerent and the defender in a war, including after playing Balance of Power card, it can ask allied players and neutral players to join the war during the alliance step. Okay. I think you can ask allied players anyway, whether or not you're England. But being able to ask neutrals to join the war is different. Rapid deployment. When the UK enters the war, including the Great War, they may immediately conduct 1 free naval movement action. Land units using this movement must end their movement in a friendly port. Okay. Presumably, naval units do not have to end in a port because you're at war. Crown Jewel. Controlling India counts as controlling 2 colonial keys. Place the Indian stability marker in the UK's event holding box. Okay. 2 colonial keys. I don't know how many colonial keys I have. I have 7 of them, supposedly. Is just India? Yeah, just India. So that should be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Good. The count works. Ireland, despite being sort of a colony, isn't counted as colonial. It is a territorial key. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excellent. British banking. The UK can pass with 2 cards in their hand. Likewise, they can save 2 cards for the next turn. UK manpower and armies. The UK tracks British and colonial manpower separately. British manpower is determined by their total territorial keys, while colonial manpower is determined by their total colonial keys. Colonial is used to determine how many standing Indian armies the UK can have during peacetime. The number of British armies the UK can field prior to the Great War is limited to their professional army, by their professional army characteristic. Yeah, okay. And the UK player does not have reserves. During the Great War, building new British armies consumes British manpower, while building new Indian armies and Commonwealth may consume colonial manpower. No, it does. The Commonwealth Army can only be built during the Great War, and it must be built in Australia, New Zealand, or Canada. And once again, a note about this, I'm sure I read that exactly before. There's cut and paste where the rules say the same thing. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that. It definitely bloats the rules, makes me make a statement like this. I feel like things shouldn't be fully cut and pasted, but the free British units that the UK gets during the outbreak step do not cost any manpower, though. India! Only the UK can control India. Internal issues in India are abstracted through the Indian stability. Tell Russia that. The marker has two sides. The front side is India stable and gives the UK +1 card during the draw phase, as long as the UK controls India. The back side is India unstable. While the marker is on India unstable, they don't get the +1 card bonus, and Indian armies get a -1 DRM, and here it says BM, if they are in the main attack defense force of a land battle. I guess that's battle modifier. I don't know. We got some writing here. The marker can be flipped between its sides via event cards, including a UK home card. While on its reverse, there's also the danger of India gaining independence versus an event. If India gains independence, displace all units in India. Skip this step if India gains independence during the Great War. The UK eliminates the Indian fort and all their Indian armies except one, and they are now limited to one Indian army for the remainder of the game. India cannot be controlled by any player for the rest of the game. Bengal is a separate space to India, and thus these rules do not apply to the Bengal space. Now I got words here. Or occupation during a war. Okay, it can be flipped between its sides due to occupation during a war. If both occupied, India goes independent. I'm going to say that's both the India and the Burma. They both have to be, or Bengal, they both have to be taken, and that'll cause Indian independence. This is, again, out of the errata. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Again, I'm not going to print out 8 pages. First of all, I can't print anything. My printer doesn't work right now. Well, it doesn't work right now. I may or may not be able to fix it by putting an ink cartridge in. I've got far more important reasons to put that ink cartridge in there. I've got 2 documents I have to print out, one of which I've waited since, I don't know, I think January, and have been delaying doing. So, yeah, it's just not happening anytime soon. The India Fort. The UK player can place the India Fort marker in India using one of their home cards. Yeah? Is that all it does? Yeah, it does all kinds of stuff. Okay. The India Fort marker cannot be placed or upgraded using the standard construct fort action. Its maximum level is 2, and it never degrades during the end phase. The Indian fort cannot be removed to cancel a retreat during the Great War. This fort has to do with full garrisoning in the sub-content. But whatever. There's not much more, but it's so hard just reading through. I don't know. All right, the French. They have Zouaves, an elite colonial expeditionary force unique to France. It gives a +1 to pacification rolls, a +1, and may provide +1 to land battles. Remember, that's optional because you might lose it. It may be rebuilt in Algeria for 1 CP during the action phase. It's also rebuilt for free at the start of any prep phase. What's a prep phase? Is that every war? Like, there's only one Great War outbreak. But what is a prep phase? Again, you know, these terms. I'll be back. Think of that name here. Like, this is a term I don't remember from anything. There's the Great War outbreak, but there's only one of them in a turn. Or in a Great War. There's the wartime sequence of play. I don't see a prep phase here. So that wouldn't happen. Is there a prep phase every turn in the Great War? That may be. Like, it would be really helpful. What there really should be here is a rules reference. Prep phase here either. There's a planning step. It's a mystery. Looked in the index, and it's standard every turn. Every turn you get it for free, which seems pretty intense. Like, why would you want to buy them? All right, so what was I at? It can be rebuilt during the action phase. It's also rebuilt for free in Algeria at the start of any prep phase. Wow. Good luck remembering that. On page 22. If that's not mentioned, and it feels like it shouldn't be. Yeah, there's no mention of Zouaves in here. And I wouldn't expect there to be, but man, how do you remember? It's like out of normal order. You know where it should be? It should be up with the minor power production, which happens, I don't remember when that happens. I thought that happened at the end of the turn, at the end of each turn. But maybe that happens in the prep phase too. That would at least make some sense if it happened then. So what do we got here? End phase, militarism. Yeah, so why would you do it here? And I guess if it comes after dealing cards or whatever, but it would make absolute sense to put it in here. Militarize, non-player power buildup. I'm gonna put Zouaves over here in the end phase. I see no reason to put it over in a period in a step of the game that has nothing to do with rebuilding armies, whereas this has to do with free building of armies. For whatever it's worth, I'm putting the rules reference in, but you know where I'm most likely to see it is over here. I guess I could pencil it on there. I hate defacing these. They're so nice. But I think it's a good idea. This is interesting. This is not really glossy, but I can't write on it. It won't take pencil. I mean, I guess I could mark it up with something more significant, but I could barely get a mark on there. And I'm afraid I'm going to carve into it. All right, what the fuck else am I? France starts as the Second Empire. France loses a war, or French stability reaches 1. It immediately becomes the Third Republic. By the way, there should be a note here. There is not. There's a note up here. It doesn't have it. Sure, it's in here. But if a track is causing something to happen, and it's specific to that country or whatever, would make a lot of sense to put a marker, you know, not a marker, but some kind of indicator to say, go look at your national characteristics. This is the kind of national characteristic that maybe a player doesn't pay attention to, because it might be to their advantage not to be highly aware of. I'm not sure. It immediately becomes the Third Republic. The switch cannot happen during the Great War. Each government's special ability is as follows. The Second Empire, after France calculates their CP war budget, including during the Great War, they automatically increase it by 1. A bonus. The Third Republic, once per turn at the beginning of the Alliance Resolution, France gains 2 free CPs that they can immediately spend on Alliance track actions, which I think is the great power stuff. Strangely enough, you want to have the Second Empire for the Great War. The Third Republic sounds more useful during... Maybe not. I don't know. I think the Empire... But during normal turns, when you're not going to war, and France only went to 1 war, they aided in the Italian... I don't know if they actually... Yeah, I think they intervened. Okay, cultural symbol. If France has at least 4 City of Light points, France gains an extra card per turn. They have what? Reduce the French player's City of Light points by 1 when Paris is occupied by an enemy power in wartime. I'm looking to see if I have a special track or something for this. I vaguely remember reading it. This can happen multiple times per game. The French player can have a maximum of 6 City of Light points. France gains these via their own home card or the Eiffel Tower event. Okay, well, this is all very interesting. Do I have counters for this? I mean, I'd better, because I don't know. Yeah, I have City of Light counters. Great. So they're just event holding things. And it works okay. It's just it completely blindsided me here. And I'm sure I noticed it before. Okay. Austrian characteristics, and the glare always hits it about this point in this. It's just where my lights hit. At the end of the diplomacy phase of turn 1, Austria gains an alliance with 2 minor powers of their choice that do not contain an opponent's diplomatic marker. Okay, when's the diplomacy phase? The real problem is this. All this lookup and prep isn't going to help me. Tomorrow is Friday. I presumably go dancing. I'm not sure if I will, but diplomacy phase. Okay, that's 11. Let's write something else in. I've been thinking that the rules are pretty good at having rules references, which is part of the reason I'm sticking them in here. And then I thought, wow, it's kind of pedantic to be putting in things that go into the sequence of play. Look, it's very obvious it's the X phase. Yeah, sort of, except there's 3 sequences of play in this game. And it was in the 3rd one I looked at for the Zouaves. All right, I need to rearrange things, but yeah, I just wanted to point out that, yeah, it did seem kind of silly to like have to put a rules, I could see why they dropped the rules reference because it goes into the sequence of play, but when there are 3 sequences of play in the game in very different places in the rule book, let's keep going. A compromise needed. During the prep phase of turn 2, add the dual monarchy card to the Austrian hand if it was not played for its event on turn 1. That's going to be hard to remember. Look, each player is going to have these things in their mind, but because I'm playing solo, well, maybe, right? But because I'm playing solo, it's particularly hard. It is not up here. It's apparently a card in the deck. Special actions. Reforms. For 3 CP, they can give 1 eligible nationality their rights. For 3 CP, they can expand citizenship to somebody who... Okay, let's keep going. I think it has to be somebody who has reforms already. 3 CPs, you can give 1 eligible nationality their right. Expand citizenship. 3 CP, you can try to give somebody full citizenship. Roll a die. On a 3 or greater, it succeeds. Increase the difficulty of the die roll by 1 for each nationality that has citizenship. Before rolling, you can decrease your stability by 1 to give yourself +2 DRM. Okay. So I guess they're separate things. You don't have to give them rights before citizenship. Incorporate. This ability has 2 effects. A special 3 CP action, 3 CPO. Austria gains control of a minor power that 1 is allied to Austria and 2 has a nationality that has been granted full citizenship. Additionally, Austria can launch wars of unification targeting spaces that contain nationalities with full citizenship. I got some pencil in here. When Austria takes control, the minor is eliminated. Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of like German unification, except they can't do it to German states, which I feel is kind of wrong. I feel like they should have a German Catholic. I don't know where it would apply to. It would definitely apply to Bavaria. Württemberg and Baden aren't on there. Alsace-Lorraine, probably. Like places that Austria could have incorporated even at this late date. They probably couldn't manage the North German territories. Although there was, still the possibility of a huge full German federation if they defeat Prussia. Like if they defeated Prussia in a war, I think they could have created still a full German consolidation, even with their already problematic structure. But it wouldn't have been like the German Empire, right? And it might have caused greater problems for Austria. So it's like this big what if. Another one, it's up to the player to remember this because he's the guy with it. Whenever Austria decreases stability, roll a die. Add +1 DRM for each minority nationality with rights. On a roll of 6 or higher, Austria passes and there's no further effect. If Austria fails, they must either discard a random card or take a -1 card marker. If they can't discard a card, they must take the card marker. This has no effect in the Great War. Continental power, pacification costs 2 CP. Worse than Prussia's, or worse than Germany's situation. They're just not going to expand. They have a Mediterranean port and have enough problems. Arbiter of Italy. Until Italy unifies, when Austria declares a war of liberation, they can target spaces with Italian nationalities that are not currently in rebellion. In other words, Austria can liberate Italian minor powers, even if their space doesn't contain rebels. I don't know what that means. I mean, look, I can go, I don't know. If somebody conquers part of Italy, I can go in and take it back from them. But is that any different from what other people can do? I'm going to look up War of Liberation. I think that Austria could declare a war of liberation against Serbia at the beginning of the game, or against Ottomans with regard to Serbia. War of liberation. Purpose: retake home spaces or liberate spaces that are controlled by the defender and are in rebellion. Okay. So I've got a little bit more power in Italy. See, I completely forgot that. I thought I could just go in and start liberating nationalities left and right. I would say that the Russians tried to do that in the Balkans. Maybe they have some special capabilities there. I'm not seeing it, but a new way forward, a new hope. Austria gets +1 manpower when 4 nationalities have citizenship. Good luck. Austria must control a space with that nationality in order for it to count towards this bonus. Austria gains this manpower during the end phase. This is a one-time bonus. That nationality sounds singular. It should be all 4. I don't know. I just don't know. I gotta swap batteries. I got a decent amount of tea left. I may actually have to stop after Austria. There's almost nothing left, but I'm fatigued again. Pushing on rights and full citizenship. There are 8 nationalities that can be granted rights and full citizenship, listed over here. None of them are Germans. Germans have them, by the Austrian player. These are shown by having the flags on the Austrian display next to the event holding box. A nationality must be granted rights before it can be granted full citizenship. Okay, that's where that is. Funny thing, where it says expand citizenship, it doesn't say that it has to have rights, but it does get me down to this, where this is present. That is really the only requirement. A nationality retains the benefits of having rights when it has full citizenship. Austria can still grant rights and full citizenship to these 8 nationalities, even if they become a minor power, or if they are a minor power allied to an enemy of AU, or if they are in a home space of another power, another player. Wait, what? So Serbians are something we could grant rights to. We don't have them in Austria. We could conquer them eventually. To me, it seems like a ridiculous thing to do it to someone that you already don't have. Romania is another case where it's already neutral. Croats, we have some of them. Hungarians, obviously, we're going to have. Bosnia, we don't have yet. Do we? Wait, these look like Croats. They're different flag. Great. No, wait, Bosnians. Oh, Bosnians are the flag behind it. Okay, these are not Croats. These are Serbs. Okay. That makes more sense to me. Czechs we're going to have inside our own. Polish we're going to have inside our own. Yeah. So I could grant full citizenship to things I don't have in my country yet. That sounds like a pretty iffy thing. There are certainly 4 that are already in Austria. But let's see. I thought there were too many nationalities over there. A nationality retains the benefit when it. Okay. Granting a nationality rights helps the Austrians with their unstable situation trait, as more nationalities with rights improves their chance not to lose a card when they lose stability. That's just rights. Citizenship doesn't matter for that. Citizenship is useful for the new way forward, but that's a lot to do. Granting a nation full citizenship gives 2 benefits to the Austrian player. First, it can use its incorporate ability to take control of a minor power, provided that minor power has full citizenship and is allied to the AU. Okay. Second, the AU can declare wars of unification targeting those nationalities. In both of the above cases, this includes a nationality that became a minor power over the course of the game. Additionally, a nationality with full citizenship is no longer considered a minority nationality to the Austrian player. I don't know what that means. Here's what's weird. Whenever AU decreases, the only place I know, or the only place I looked that said it right away. Whenever they decrease stability, roll a die, add +1 DRM for each minority nationality with rights on a 6 or higher that they're. So if you give them citizenship, they're no longer considered a minority nationality, so you no longer get that bonus. That's honestly the only place that I see minority nationality. I'm trying to zip through these and see something. The only place I see the terms of minority nationality are in that bonus that they get. And boy, that would piss me off. Because it takes away their rights and makes them unstable again. I don't think that's what's intended here, but I don't know. Maybe there are cards that talk about minority nationalities, and this would obviate that. I'm not willing to get rid of the make the unstable situation bonus go away just because you gave them citizenship. All right, I'm breaking for a while. I was hoping to clean things to finish this up with only two nations going, but I need a break. As Friday dawn begins, well, it's more than begun. Cloudy day. Let's get the last couple out of the way. All right, Russia. Steamroller. Russia's reserve army limit is equal to either the manpower or their industry, whichever is lower, +1. Okay. It's not a huge advantage, I think. Scorched Earth, the first key Russia loses during the Great War does not lower Russian stability. Endless Space. Armies supporting a battle into or from a Russian home space only contribute half their firepower. Remember, armies' firepower can only be halved once. Clarification. If the supporting armies are supporting into a Russian home space and a non-Russian space and a Russian non-space, I don't know. They are halved. For example, if an army in Pomerania is supporting an attack from Prussia into Poland, I don't know what the hell. This clarification is confusing me more. Like, if supporting armies are supporting into a Russian home space and a non-Russian space, why would they be supporting into two different battles? I mean, you're not recalculating then. I have no idea what they're trying to say here. But Pomerania is supporting an attack from Prussia into Poland. Pomerania is supporting an attack from Prussia into Poland. No doubt. I mean, this doesn't even seem like a weird situation. Anyway. Like, if it was Prussia and Poland into Belarus, but if it's going into or out of, like, Russian home space into Russian home space is going to be halved as far as I can see. Into or from. They're going into in that example. I have no idea what this clarification, all this clarification has done is really confuse me again. Trans-Siberian Railroad. Completing the TSRR gives the Russian player +1 card per turn and increases their total keys by 2. That's weird. Okay, now I'm questioning whether there's keys that they're not getting over here, because they've got 1, 2. This is the thing that with pieces on the map, it's really hard to do a recount because they fill shit up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8. Okay, I've got 8 keys on that map. 9, 10, 11. Like, I don't believe their 12 key thing. I count again. 1, 2. Maybe I missed Riga. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 11. Okay, I don't know. Like, I'm just trusting this circle here, and I don't know if I should, because I keep coming up with 11. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I come up with 12. All right, I'll believe it. I don't know. Somehow it magically creates a couple more keys, I guess. Like, I thought it would be adding the keys from back there, but no. Additionally, the Russian player and Russian allies during wartime can rail 1 army along the railroad per impulse. Agrarian. Russia needs to roll a 6 to industrialize. Second Rome. If Russia occupies Istanbul at the end of the war that they've won, they automatically take control of the space. Controlling Istanbul at the end of the game and or start of the Great War gives Russia 2 extra victory points. So this seems to me like they could even... Yeah, this seems to me to be exterior to any... goals that they take. They can just take Constantinople on their own. Okay. Important. If Russia takes Istanbul, Ankara becomes the new Ottoman capital. Yeah. Ottoman capabilities. Local autonomy. Keys with Arab or Egyptian nationality only count towards Ottoman's total Arab keys. Tunisia and Tripoli neither count as keys nor for power projection unless the Ottomans can trace a line of communication to the keys by land. Okay, so additionally, during the Great War, Ottoman does not lose stability for losing Tunisia or Tripoli. So Ottoman keys, they're going to be annoying too. We're looking at 8 and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, not anymore, 5, 6, 7, 8. Arab keys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in Mecca. I don't have the Egyptian key yet. And because I don't have the land connection, I can't count these. Now, that's nothing special. Okay? Territorial keys. Let's take a look at France. I don't know what's up with Algeria, to be honest. Well, they don't even own it, so it's actually not a big deal. Because we're pacifying it. Now, strangely, Algeria is a home space. But I think it becomes a colonial key and a colonial home space. We should count these and we should get 9 here, and there are none there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I got 10 keys here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I got 9. You must have counted Piedmont or something. I don't know. Okay. But you can see that maintaining these tracks at the right level is going to be a pain in the ass. They're correct right now, I guess. But, and then there's things like, what's up with Algeria, if I take it? West Africa's purple. Algeria being blue seems really weird. I don't know if that's a territorial or a home key, but if it's territorial, well, it's obviously home. If it's not colonial, I got a problem with it, which is that I can't connect except by going all the way around the land for territorial keys. So it's got to be colonial. Yeah, there wasn't any rule on this. Yeah, okay. Great. Ottoman manpower. Ottomans have 2 different types of armies, Turkish and Arab. Turkish armies must be built-in keys that do not contain a minor nationality. Okay, so I can't build them over in the European areas. While Arab armies can only be built-in keys with Arab nationality, including Egypt if I get it, but not Tripoli or Tunisia, which can become independent. The Ottomans track the Arab and Turkish manpower separately. They got two different sets. Arab manpower is based on the number of Arab keys, while all others contribute to Turkish. Europeanization. The OT cannot play their own card for industrialization, and they need to roll a 6 after DRMs to advance their industry. Poor infrastructure. All Ottoman home spaces, I want to call them OT, I don't know, or OG or something. All Ottoman home spaces, including those in Europe, have a maximum stacking value of 2. Thought 2 countries had something like this, but I guess not. Jihad. Gain 3 Jihad markers at the start of the Great War. Jihad markers are placed on the OT event holding box. When they fight a battle in an OT home space, a Caucasus space, or a Great Game space, they can discard a Jihad and give their opponent a -1 modifier in that battle. Which is no different than getting a +1 yourself, so I don't know. Discard all Jihad markers at the end of a war. Okay, let's take a look. You gain them at the start of the GW. Oh, jihad markers can also be gained through the OT's jihad home card. Okay, so we could jihad in preparation for another war. Apparently one of our home cards allows that. Special, if Russia takes Istanbul, Ankara becomes the OT thing. OT limited to 1 EC until young. Okay, so as an effect of Istanbul being taken, the Ottomans are limited to 1 EC until the Young Turks happen, if that particular case arises. So less elite core. Now, at least that's how I read it. That's what the errata seem to indicate. Okay, whatever. It's not that big a deal either way. So that is the rules, and they were painful to go through. And again, there's reasons that I think that no matter what, a game of this nature is going to have it's going to be very painful to start hanging additional chrome onto. This is my problem with sort of the CDGs in general. They can only hold so much chrome for me. I know some people really took to Virgin Queen. I'm willing, like that was the first of the Here I Stand flavored CDGs that I was like, well, I mean, it was the second one, where I was just like, I mean, where do you go? You can't just make another Here I Stand, because that would be too simple. But Here I Stand was already at the limits, I think, of what this kind of thing can hold. Now, that's not the case. If you're addicted to one of these games, if you're really into it and play it regularly, you can get deeply into the strategy or the narrative or whatever. The problem that I have with something like Virgin Queen, and certainly I'm going to have with this, and I've had with all of the ones that came after Here I Stand, following that kind of thing. And this isn't really Here I Stand. Like all the other ones have a very simplistic combat mechanism. This one creates this separate wars, kind of like Pax Britannica does. But, you know, I can cover, or a game like Pax Britannica can cover a great deal of what's going on in this game without it feeling like there's all kinds of special cases hanging all over the place. And it has, I don't know even why, because that's an area-based map. I think it's baked into tables and stuff like that, as opposed to, but you would think that could be baked into the cards. This feels like there's a lot of weight in the rules in terms of just a lot of crap hanging on the game system itself. That's too much decoration on there. And that can happen in hex and counter games. I won't disagree with that. Like Summer Storm over there. That was hugely painful with it. And then something covering the same sort of period, minus the Great War, because it doesn't handle Europe itself, not directly. Something like Pax Britannica, which handles much of what this covers, can do it in such a lighter fashion, and it too is it's not even really a point-to-point map, but it's close enough, okay. Yeah, of course that goes to an era where there was very little going on in Europe itself. Like, the big questions had already been resolved. I'm excited about the fact that this takes us from that 1850 period, where I felt like things can go very different. But can they really? Again, there's already enough hanging on this game. But I have these feelings of, look, Austria could have, I make this argument, Austria could have done something for unifying Germany. France, they've got most of what they would have had. And Belgium is the one exception, etc. But France, other than the Napoleonic Wars, where they grabbed everything. But France had claims to a lot of interesting things in an earlier period. They weren't really interested in expanding their territory, though. But the Austrians still did have an interest in a unified Germany under their command. At least certain currents in Austria did. And I could see things that kind of changed the nature of it. At the very least, Germans are citizens of Austria. They should have the same kind of liberation capabilities or something until they lose a war to the Prussians. You know, I don't know. And honestly, if they beat the Prussians, I would say, look, maybe they could have forced some kind of Austrian-led confederation. I've talked about that before. Is it, and out there beyond the reach? Well, maybe, but again, I played an Empires and Arms game where Austria fucking was railing France and showing them what for. So, it can be fun to have those kind of situations. I've got real worries about like the diplomacy system because it's very hard to justify this. There is going to be a balance of power in terms of diplomacy. Not that a balance of power wouldn't sort of naturally kind of happen. I'd rather have it emerge from players' desires than anything else. But there's something very disturbing about someone who's doing very, very well and is very powerful not attracting enemies. If you know what I mean. Let's say Germany is dominating. They've beaten up France. They've unified. They look like they're on a roll for the game. And yeah, it would only make sense that the other powers would align against them. But it feels like there's sort of an inhibition against something like that. And the fact that you don't control your own diplomacy, again, it makes it kind of feel like, well, what exactly am I? I don't know. That feels very weird. These are things that may grow on me, but they really feel like, okay, maybe they feel like huge innovations, or maybe they feel like, right now they feel like these kind of disconcerting things that I'm just not sure I'm convinced of. Of course, to be fair, when I face new stuff, I often dig my heels in against it. I saw my first CDGs back in the 1990s, and I didn't like them. Of course, it was We the People, and I don't even remember the Hannibal-based one. Successors kind of felt cool to me, but it was multiplayer, and I've tended towards the multiplayer CDGs a lot more than the two-player stuff, for whatever reason. When I first saw Coin, it was hard to cope with and hard to grasp, and I'm not sure it's gotten all that much better for me, but I've grown to respect and like it, at least in 20th century counter-revolutionary type stuff. When I first saw Levy and Campaign, I was so excited because of the topic. It still is a struggle every time I look at it, but, there's the topic, man. It's doing something that nothing else, that couldn't be done on that hex encounter type of design. And, is this going to challenge PAX for me? No, because PAX has such a nice light feel to it. No matter what, unless I play this often, this is just not gonna hook me in the way that PAX once upon a time did. And now I can still pick up a game of PAX and still get a beautiful narrative out of it. Of course, that is a badly flawed game. in terms of balance, in terms of you can look at my review on that. But that's a game with serious problems. It's got a timing issue, and it's got the actual play balance where Britain can basically walk to a victory almost no matter what they do. Although I've seen Britain not win games sometimes. Never when I'm playing them. Is that true? Yeah. Anyway, let's send this up. I don't know when I'm going to get to start playing it. I'm looking at, if I go out tonight, I'm probably not going to start till Monday because it's hard. Saturday obviously is going to be I'll be wiped out, but even Sunday, I'm probably going to be very reluctant to start something this complex.